used.
I see some.
Apparently we're on.
What is MCES?
Hereby call to order the Roseville City Council meeting for Monday, November 27th, 2023. Mr. City Manager, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Etten.
Here.
Councilmember Groff.
Here.
Councilmember Strawn.
Here.
Councilmember Shorter.
Here.
Mayor Rowe.
Here. And with us at the dais, we have our City Attorney, Rachel Tierney, who's on my right at the end of the dais, and the other end of the dais is our City Manager, Pat Trudgeon. And we'll also have other staff and guests participating in the meeting, and they'll be introduced as those agenda items come up. We would ask if you have a cell phone to be sure to silence it or otherwise assure that it doesn't disrupt the meeting this evening. We also want to make folks aware that there is information about the meeting available to the public on the back table underneath the clock in the back of the room. There are multiple copies of tonight's agenda, as well as one copy of all of the materials, which is in a 3-ring binder, which is available for your use if you need to refer to that during the course of the meeting. We've got a number of public hearings tonight, and so we'll go through the process for what's involved and what the sort of the rules of the road for a public hearing are as we get into that. But that should give us at least an introduction this evening as to what's going on, and we don't have any remote participants this evening, so we shouldn't have to provide the procedures for that. So with that, we'll ask folks to stand if they're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next on our agenda then is approval of tonight's agenda. This is an opportunity to check with our staff as usual to see if there are any changes that staff is requesting to the agenda as it's been presented this evening.
There's no changes by staff, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. Check also with the council members. Are there any changes that council members would like to make to tonight's agenda or any items in section 10 that council members would like removed from that section for separate consideration? No. All right, does not appear to be the case. For most of you that are here this evening, various agenda items will come up and you'll have an opportunity to speak or ask questions as those items come up. But we also do have a section at the end of our agenda, starting at the bottom of the first page and continuing, I believe, onto the second page. It's section 10, which is called the consent agenda. This is a number of items that are typically considered fairly administrative and usually aren't theoretically terribly controversial, and so they're grouped together as a single action at the end of the meeting after we've gone through all the rest of our business. However, we do want to check at the beginning of each meeting just to make sure if there is somebody here that wishes to either make a comment or ask a question about one of the items in section 10 at the end of the agenda, the consent agenda, you can let us know now and we can actually move that item earlier in the meeting so that you can be able to participate on that item without having to wait to the very end. So just double check with folks if anyone is here for an item in section 10 of tonight's agenda. Once again, starting on the bottom of the first page and continuing on to the second page, items 10A through 10H. And if you're not here for one of those, that's okay. But we do want to, like I said, check at the start of the meeting. If there is anyone here for one of those items, if you just let us know at this time, and we'll make sure and consider that item separately. Is there anyone here for an item in section 10 of tonight's agenda? That does not include the budget and tax hearing. It does not include the Youth Hockey Association gambling law. It does not include the public hearings about various easement vacations on various rights of way. And it does not include the liquor license renewals, just for the example of a few things that people might be here for. I don't see anybody seeking recognition to be to ask a question or comment on an item in section 10. So on that basis, and with no changes from a staff or council perspective, and a motion to approve the agenda as presented would be in order.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Shorter, second by Councilmember Strawn to approve the agenda as presented for this meeting. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. We have our agenda for this evening. That brings us to our first opportunity for public comment this evening. We will have public comment opportunities as we take up agenda items, but at the start of each meeting, we also do provide an opportunity for public comment on a general basis, not related to the agenda items this evening. It might be something that's of general city business related to, or something that's of interest to people in the community more broadly, but not, once again, on tonight's agenda. And as I said, we'll have an opportunity for public comment on agenda items as they come up. But with that, just a quick synopsis of the rules of the road for public comment. We do, by council rule, have a 3-minute time limit per speaker. And I try to enforce that generously and gently. But also then we want you to start your comments with your name and street or address, address comments or questions to the city council, and they'll be taken into account by the council if there is an answer that needs to be done, or in the case of the general comment, if there's a response that may be required, we may have to follow up after the meeting. We don't always have the answer right during the public comment. With that, I see we have a member of the public here for general public comment this evening, and so I'll recognize Mr. Hess.
Roger Hess Jr., Wagner Place in Roseville, Minnesota. I just have a quick question, and I'm going to make it hypothetical so you didn't have to move anything from the consent agenda. If a tenant at your strip mall to the north that the city owns doesn't pay their city utility bill, and then you send it to Ramsey County and put it on the property taxes, does the city then actually end up paying the water bill, or is there some other procedure you have for that?
We can follow up on that, and that may come
Okay.
up during our discussion about the certifying the water bills too, so stay tuned.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for your question. Great, hello.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Rowe and City Council members. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Karen Zakovich. I'm a resident at 1160 Josephine Road. You may be aware that we were subjected to an extensive gas line replacement project in our neighborhood this fall. Needless to say, that hasn't gone well up until this point. On or about September 20th, we noticed that we have 2 brick and granite staircases that go up each side of our home, and there was fluorescent paint that was sprayed on the granite and brick. I brought that to the attention of Tyler Van Eck, who is our contact at XL Energy, and he assured me that those spots would be easily removed with upcoming rainfall. I can assure you that has not been the case. I have been in touch with Tyler Van Eck at XL Energy on numerous occasions, expressing our concern, only to be met with the same response. We're going to take care of it at the end of the project. We're at the end of the project. Those paint spots are honestly our biggest concern. However, many neighbors have expressed frustration with the state that their yards have been left in at this time. I did talk to Katie at the City Council about a week ago. She referred me to Jesse, who was the head of Public Works, and I spoke to him at length kind of about our concerns, especially with the paint and the bare areas of dirt that were going to be left for the fall and winter and the erosion and things like that that could happen. I don't know who followed up with that exactly, but a couple days later, a water truck showed up at our house and sprayed the dirt areas with water and then kind of this green seed mixture. It sounds like a lovely sort of response to what we had been faced with. However, now our driveway and 2 vehicles that were parked in the driveway were full of green seed spray as well. As of late, we've reached out to Tyler again, my husband, on one occasion, and haven't been able to get in touch with him to find any resolution. I did get a hold of Tyler today. It really is just now a moot point about this paint on our steps. And, you know, he says, oh, well, I thought someone was going to follow up with that the week before Thanksgiving. Gosh, I didn't know that hadn't happened. So it's kind of just this runaround. And to give you kind of a backstory of that is we just purchased our home in August, and the people that lived there before us had lived there for about 40 years. I have paperwork that can sustain the fact that this project on both sides of our house with the granite and brick steps were in excess of $60,000 when they were done 20 years ago. So my real concern is, how is this going to get taken care of? How is this going to be made right? And how is it going to be put back to its original condition that's going to match both sides of our home? And then we have a member in our community too who emails the entire neighborhood and kind of just keeps everybody abreast of what's going on. And I reached out to her and just asked, hey, we can't be the only ones that are really frustrated with how this project went. So she was kind enough to send out an email to all those residents, and I did hear back from a person who lives at 1180 Josephine. I have permission to share pictures of their property and their concerns as well. They had a giant water truck that drove through their front yard and has possibly also caused extensive damage to their sprinkler system. So yeah, it's just really disappointing how this has all kind of been left. And in talking to Jesse at the Public Works, he also said that the intent was to keep this permit open through at least next spring or summer, knowing that, this time of year it's hard to put things back to their rightful spot in the way they were kind of thing. But I guess I'm really hoping that that's true and that someone within the city council or within the city can follow up with Excel and just make our yards right again and make our property right again. I mean, we've really suffered probably tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage just to our home alone. And I'm not here just on behalf of myself and my husband. I'm here on behalf of our neighbors too.
Sure.
We really take pride in our houses.
Yep. I'm going to have to stop
Yeah,
you
I'm
there 'cause
sorry.
We
Yeah.
did bump up.
I'm chatty.
Tough
That's
against
okay.
that. That's all right. I think what we'll do, though, is make sure that we follow up with our staff to see that we can make sure we're after Excel and probably their contractors to make sure that they follow through on their requirements on that. So
And I do have some pictures too. if
feel
you'd
free to
like
leave those with Mr.
Okay,
Trudgeon,
that'd
and
be
then we'll
great.
make sure we can all get those.
Thank you so much. On behalf of me and our neighbors, we appreciate your service to our community greatly.
Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
And certainly, we're sorry you're going through that. All right, is there anyone else here this evening for general public comment, not specifically related to an agenda item this evening? Right. With that, then, I'll close the opportunity for general public comment, and we'll go ahead and move into our business items. Our first business item this evening is our annual hearing on the proposed 2024 city budget and tax levy. And we sort of lump in with that also our utility rates and everything else that's affected by our budget. And so what will happen this evening, we have our finance director, Michelle Petrick, with us, and there'll be a presentation about sort of the general information about the budget. And then we'll have an opportunity for members of the public to weigh in following the rules of public comment that I just went through earlier in the meeting, and we can reiterate those again. And then the City Council is not taking action this evening as far as making decisions about the budget or the tax levy. We're receiving your comments this evening. And then we may have information we request or want followed up either based on your comments or our own interests with staff, and then ultimately the city council will take action on all these matters at next Monday's meeting. That gives us an opportunity to have a few days to respond to or deal with any inquiries, and then try to make sure by the time we get to next Monday, we're able to have all the information we need to make our final decisions. So certainly if you're here this evening for the budget, this isn't the last meeting about the budget, and you may want to also either come or tune in to next week's meeting for the ultimate decision making. With that, I believe I'll turn it over to Ms. Petrick and to begin the presentation this evening related to the budget and tax levy.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a brief presentation before you open the public hearing. The purpose of the budget hearing is to provide information on the 2024 budget and tax levy and utility rate impacts, and to provide citizens an opportunity to express their views on these impacts. The budget process began with 3 areas of discussion: whether there was a desire for changes in existing programs or service levels, was there a need to establish new programs or initiatives, and the acceptable level of property tax and fee impacts on homeowners. We started the budget process way back in March by reviewing available cash reserve levels. We discussed legislative impacts and tax base changes in June. The overall tax base for Roseville grew back one, 6.65%, and the median valued single-family home grew by 4.35%. This is a lower percentage increase than we saw in the 2023 budget process. In July, we had an overview of the capital improvement plan, which is a large part of the budget. The city manager presented his recommended budget and tax levy in August. The preliminary budget and tax levy were adopted in September. And at that point in time, the city's tax levy increase was 8.99%. And the EDA levy was presented, and since then, we've reduced the EDA levy by 13%. In November, we reviewed the draft utility rates and fee schedules. The preliminary 2024 budget is $69.6 million. This is an increase of approximately $8.3 million. The increase is due to inflationary cost increases, capital project increases, and personnel cost increases. The non-property tax revenues support the budget by 58.6%. The levy proposed is $28,785,280, which is an increase of $2,373,896, or 8.99%. The large changes, or what accounts for the changes in the tax levy, are personnel compensation adjustments related to the class and compensation study. There was reclassification of personnel, which includes increasing some FTEs. The funding for the firefighters, the 6 firefighters that we put on two years ago, utilizing federal SAFER grant dollars, has now come on. And the full 600,000 is shown here, but 400,000 is shown as a reduction in the capital levy, because over the course of the last 2 years, we had been increasing the levy, so we didn't bring the full 600,000 onto the levy in 1 year. In addition, the inflationary costs were 744,000 approximately. So the tax levy covers operations, capital, and debt service. And debt service increased slightly, and that's a function of what we have scheduled for principal and interest payments. The capital levy was reduced. Again, 400,000 of that was related to the SAFER grant, and that was moved up into operations. And then we identified 3 capital funds that could reduce their levy in order to offset increases in the operating levy. Services that are covered by the city's property tax dollar. 32% of the property taxes go to fund the police department. 16% funds the fire department. 20% goes to parks and recreation. 18% covers public works and facilities, and 14% goes to general government. Again, property tax is not the only revenue source that we have that supports these functions. Property valuations. Most of you received your preliminary property tax statements last week. And what you will notice perhaps is that your assessed valuation increased. The Ramsey County Assessor's Office is responsible for determining the valuation of all properties, residential, apartment, commercial, and industrial. Valuation notices are sent out in mid-March to all property owners, which show estimated values for 2024, which is basically when the assessor has submitted their valuations into Ramsey County Property Tax Department. In November, like I said, the proposed property tax statements were mailed out. Using those valuations and using the preliminary levies that were set in September by the county, city, school district, and other special taxing districts. Concerns or questions about valuations can be directed to the assessor's office, and I've noted the phone number there. General appeals should occur in April of the year prior to the payable year, but the assessor can also provide data to support why an individual property may have gone up. For 2024, the median valued home is $349,900. The median value in '23 was $335,400. State of Minnesota has a number of property tax rebate programs. More information can be found at the Minnesota Department of Revenue's website and on Ramsey County Property Tax website. The 2023 legislative actions did drop one in the past to qualify for homeowners to qualify for the special refund. Your property tax had to increase by 12% or more. The legislature dropped that to 6%. So more people may qualify if their property changed drastically, which would impact their tax bill. Some utility rate impact items, as we also do provide the utility rate estimates at this point in time. We have continued investment in infrastructure replacement or extending the life expectancy of the infrastructure. We are implementing the second year of the updated utility rate study, which was done by Ellers on the storm drainage, water, and sanitary sewer funds. As a reminder, St. Paul Regional water cost increased in 2024 as in 2023 by 9.5%. MCES cost, which is in the sanitary sewer fund, for Roseville, our cost increased 12.5%. This is the third year of the new contract for recycling, which resulted in increases in the recycling rates, and the council has continued to approve small increases to start building reserves to purchase carts at the end of this contract. A brief overview, and of note, there was a question when we discussed the utility rates, so I've got two alternatives here. The proposal, which has water increases going up by 8%, sanitary sewer is up 2%. And then I provide an alternative that shows the residential sewer at 0%. If we make no changes or deviation from the utility rate study recommendations, the quarterly increase for all utility services would be $15.25. That breaks down to $5.08 per month, or $61 per year. If we were to provide relief on the sanitary sewer side for residential properties, both in the base fee and the usage fee, the total quarterly increase would be $13.71, or $4.50 per month, and $54.84 per year. We are hoping to get feedback tonight as to which option the council would consider or would like to consider, so we can present a final utility recommendation next week. So what's the budget impact on a single-family residential home? Property taxes for the city would increase by $7.98 per month. The EDA would go down by 21 cents per month. Utility rates at the proposed Ellers rates would go up $5.08. So the net estimated increase per month would be $12.85. And over the course of the year, that would be $154.16. And this is based on a residential property, again, at the median value of $349.9, that uses approximately 4,000 gallons of water per month. For comparison purposes, last year, we had a 6% increase in the total city levy, which resulted in a higher monthly change than the current proposed budget. Between the city tax, the EDA tax, and the utility rates, the change from 22 to 23 was $13.45. And as you can see, the change between 23 and 24 is $12.85. And for some interesting information, because we do always base the budget presentation on the median valued home, you can see that from 2022 to 2024, the median valued home has increased by over $50,000. With that, are there any questions?
All right, thank you, Ms. Petrick. Questions from the council for staff? Oh, Mr. Trudgeon, first of all.
And just, I'm sorry, not a question, but just a clarification. She mentioned at the beginning, but the EDA levy has been slightly reduced by $13,000 from what was passed in the not to exceed. So that number of 21 cents per month reflects that new adjusted number. So I just want to make it very clear because it's not really highlighted here in the agreement. So we did lower the EDA levy by $13,000 from what was approved in September.
Okay, and I was just going to say, that's what's being proposed by staff.
That's correct.
Because the EDA or the council has not taken action on that recommendation yet. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, and I was just going to clarify maybe for members of the public also a little bit about how this all works, and I hope I can do it in about a reasonable amount of time. So a lot of decision makers have an impact on your property tax bill that you, as an individual property owner, whether you're a business or a residence, pay. Number one is the state legislature sets kind of the rules of the road for everybody to follow. And they say things like, what types of classes of property there are and how those taxes are calculated. So commercial properties of some types have certain ways of calculating their tax. Residential properties below a certain value have another way of calculating their tax, and then higher value residential properties have another way, and there's probably about 20 or 30 other ways. But that's all set by the legislature and usually doesn't change too often. Then there is the work that, as was mentioned by Ms. Petrick, that the assessor does each year to adjust property values based on their analysis of the marketplace and what's going on locally to the properties that are being taxed. And in fact, I think the assessor tries to in-person visit each property in the county once every so many years just to kind of verify some of the mathematical calculations that they do. So those are a couple of the non-City of Roseville actors in this process. And what tax you pay on your property is very directly related to what your valuation is from the county assessor's office. Then the other piece of it is the decisions that the City of Roseville makes along with the school districts, along with the county itself, because we're all using property tax based on state law as one of our major funding sources. And the way it works for the property tax, for the city tax, is that, and for other entities, is that we determine our budget and we figure out what other sources of revenue will be covering those costs and what costs can be reduced and what has to go up and things like that. And in the end, kind of whatever's left to pay based on the budget is what is paid for by the property tax. So a big chunk of our budget, as was mentioned by Ms. Petrick, almost 60%, is not paid by the property tax. Probably a huge portion of that is paid by the utility fees for your water and sewer and recycling and stormwater and things like that, which are handled on the billing of that. And usually, for the most part, the fees that you pay, especially for your usage of water, is primarily, we're trying to essentially pass through our costs that we get charged by the City of St. Paul in the case of water and by the Met Council in the case of processing the sewer. We do provide some incentives in the water billing to encourage people to use less water, so the more you use, the higher you'll pay. But that's generally how that's set up. So back to the property taxes, the way it works is that the city does all those calculations. We figure out the gross amount of property tax that we would have to collect in order to fill the gap between what we want to spend on the budget and what we've got in terms of other revenues. And then we certify that amount to the county. And the county then takes all the values in the city of Roseville and adds them up based on what the assessor determined. They know our total tax that we are asking them to collect. And essentially, with a few other factors that I won't get into because they're very technical and complicated, they take the total amount we want and divide it by the total amount of property value in the county, and it comes up with a percentage. And then they apply that percentage based on the formulas that the state has determined to each property based on the value that you're assessed at to determine what your actual tax is. So when Ms. Petrick and we talk about the median property in Roseville, we're talking about the median single-family home. There are, of course, other types of properties, certainly commercial, industrial, and other types of residential properties. But the vast majority of homes in Roseville are single-family homes, and so taking the average single-family value seems like one reasonable way to sort of assess what the impact is. But of course, depending on what happens to your individual property based on the assessed value and where you sit in the state's system of how it's calculated, that can have an impact on what you're ultimately being asked to pay. So what we're asking for comment on this evening primarily is our budget that we're proposing, how much we want to spend, and then also that tax amount that we're wanting to collect to pay for what we're spending. So hopefully that helps and hasn't been too long and too cumbersome to sit through. But like I said, primarily what we want to do is hear from the residents and taxpayers this evening in terms of this tax hearing. So unless there are other questions or information from the council, or any rebuttal from Ms. Petrick of anything I got wrong, this is our time for public comment on the proposed 2024 budget and tax levy. And once again, just to review for folks who may have come in after the start of the meeting, the process for public comment by City Council rule is that we have a 3-minute time limit per speaker. We ask that you begin your comment or question with your name and either your address or your street name. And then you've got your 3 minutes to make your comments and or ask questions to the council. Please direct the comments or questions to us. If we need to respond to questions, we'll sort of accumulate the questions on a list over the course of the comments and then circle back at the end to provide answers. If they're technical, we can answer them usually fairly easily. If they're more philosophical, that may have to come out during our council deliberation on our ultimate decisions. And then the other thing is that everybody gets kind of one chance to speak per agenda item. If you can't put all of your comments into your 3-minute period and you happen to have them written down, you can give a copy to Mr. Trudgeon and he can make sure that the City Council all gets that. And then you can certainly also follow up by email or other means to contact the City Council if you're not able to within your 3-minute time limit, get everything that you need to say said. So with that, the other thing I'll say is that we do have the 2 microphones and the 2 chairs. And so if there are a lot of people that wish to speak, we can have one person speaking and the next speaker sitting at the other microphone and ready to go. So that will kind of keep things moving. And if you want to be the next person after that, you can even sit in the front row and sort of be ready to get up to one of the 2 speakers' seats. You don't have to move or adjust the microphone at all. And if you do have a name that may not be obvious how to spell, we want to make sure we get it right in the record. So once you're finished with your comment or question, you can step off to the side. There is a clipboard there, and you can write your name just to make sure we get the spelling correct. And that can happen sort of off to the side while the next person is speaking, so we kind of keep things moving, hopefully, in an efficient manner. Anything else I forgot about the rules of the road? All right. Okay. Well, assuming you can remember what the first thing was that I said, sorry that it was so much stuff here. We'll be happy to open it up now for our official hearing on the budget and tax levy and welcome you to come up and speak to the City Council. So feel free to have a seat at one of the two microphones and provide your input. And I can say all of this is going to apply to our other hearings too, so I don't have to repeat myself now, right?
Hey, Roger Hess Jr., Wagner Place. It seems like the consensus is that the inflation next year will be about 2.5%. Is the rate that you use to figure the budget around that, or that's one question. And then, did you adjust the budget so that when we have a really large snowfall, that the plows can move 24 hours a day, or are we going to have long periods of time when they can't move and the roads become impassable? And then I have a question about claims. Since you don't budget for claims, you don't have a fund for claims, where does the money come from to pay for claims? And it would be nice if the department heads and the city manager and assistant city manager did not have their wages increase next year by a percentage greater than what their employees below them, because it looks like they're gonna get about 9% increase, but just like tonight, you're showing the firemen get only a 4% plus 3%, and it doesn't always look good when the bosses get bigger increases than the people underneath them. So it maybe could phase in the department heads and the assistant manager and managers over 2 years or something, so that their percentage increase is not greater than the people working for them. And that's everything. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hess.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak to the proposed 2024 budget or tax levy? Or for that matter, utility fees? All right.
Vaughn, I live on,
Oops, you're gonna have to
County
wait, you're
Road.
gonna have to wait till you have a seat so we can make sure. you hear
Okay.
you. Well-
yeah, Vaughn, I live on County Road C2 West, and my property valuation went up $40,000. And my questions are similar to what the gentleman before me was asking. How do you justify a 9% increase in my property valuation when the inflation rate is less than 3%? Can you answer that question?
We can follow up with you on that. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, and again, as for Roseville budget, my property tax went from 1,400 to 1,600, a 12.5% increase. And again, I'm wondering, why did it go up over 12% if the inflation rate is only 3%?
Right.
Those are my questions. Do you have any answers?
We'll see if there are other questions, and then we'll follow up at the end of the public comment here.
All right. Do I fill this out?
Just maybe write your name so that we've got the spelling for the record. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the proposed budget and tax levy? We've got the other microphone available. All right. Doesn't appear to be the case. So we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and public comment opportunity for the 2024 budget and tax levy, and would note that we will, as I said, be taking this up at our next meeting on next Monday evening. And certainly, if you have comments or questions at that time related to the budget, feel free to bring them in at that point as well. Certainly, we're not closed to hearing from the public at any of our discussions about these matters. As to the question that the gentleman had, and it looks like he may have left the room, but we'll go ahead and try to provide some answers, and Ms. Petrick, you may have to help out on some of these things. I can say on the property values and what Ramsey County does in terms of how much they change an individual property value, and that doesn't necessarily relate specifically to the inflation rate. The inflation rate is a federal government calculation based on a sort of what they call a market basket of goods, and they look at how much those cost and changes in those costs over time, and that's what they do to calculate the inflation rate. Housing is a factor in it, but they can also, depending on which number you look at, exclude housing as well, and I'm not 100% sure which number is being talked about. But regardless of that, I don't think there's any question that as people have looked at the marketplace, both for rental as well as for the cost of purchasing a home, I don't think there's any question that the general trend has been fairly significantly upward. So that's why there isn't necessarily a direct correlation between property value changes, especially your individual property, and what the generalized inflation rate is. Ms. Petrick?
Correct. Again, the county assessor establishes the assessed valuation for every single property. So an individual residential property may only see a 1% increase, but other properties may see a 12, 13, 14% increase. We use the average, and again, the total value, all property within the city of Roseville went up 6.99%. We use averages, average residential valuation, because again, properties are going to change at different rates. And the assessor may be able to provide the comparables to what caused an individual property to increase. They do come around every 5 years to examine properties, and they do ask a number of questions with regard to any changes within your house. Have you added stuff to your house? Have you removed rooms? You know, all these things go into factoring in how they determine the valuation. They also look at comparable sales. And sales valuations over the course of the last few years have been, I've never seen a housing market quite like this, where prices have been exceeding what they were posted for. That's now filtering in to the valuations over the last 2 years in those comparable sales.
Okay, thank you. I think that
Yeah.
probably answers that one. As to the snow plowing, I don't believe we've added anything into the budget for being able to completely plow the city within, or to operate over a 24-hour period rather than having the shift operations. Now, sometimes, depending on the event, we may still use overtime. There are still things that we do to try to make sure that we're maintaining the safety of our roads, but we have not budgeted for a 24-hour plowing operation as the norm.
That's correct.
Okay. Great. As to claims, I believe that, and I don't know that that's insurance claims, because certainly we're insured through the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, and they would be handling any insurance claims, but we may be sort of self-insured for some things.
This is a question that has come up before. What we budget is for average insurance costs. We have a risk management fund where we account for all claims. What we budget is an average of those claims, whether it be work comp or property and liability. Those insurance charges are within every department budget. And the funding comes from the departments into the risk fund where the claims are paid out.
So if we have a tendency towards more claims history or higher claims in the past history, that will affect the average that we use, and we might budget a little more in the
Correct.
subsequent years. Okay.
But we haven't changed the insurance number in 5 years.
Okay. And then I believe the percent increase for sort of the management, I think that's referring to the changes in the classification and compensation study, because I believe, generally speaking, for instance, cost of living is the same for each class of employees, and for all union employees, it would be a fixed amount for everybody. For our union employees, it's based on the contracts, and so whatever the contract is what the budgeted COLA would be for those. So I believe there may be some differential as it relates to the total amount or the percent change for certain classifications within the classification and compensation study, but that may be because of sort of what the starting point of those is as opposed to other factors. So,
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I could, that's correct. Just generally speaking, we're, if I remember, at 8% below the market minimums and 10% below the maximums across the board. Each position does vary a little bit, so department heads, just like other employees, are going to see different results depending on where they started off and how the classification system came forward and indicated where they were in the market. And then also another variable is where they're currently in the current system and where they would potentially move to. So it's really across the board as far as affecting people differently. And that is just an outcome of us doing this classification and compensation study, especially after a decade when we're so far behind. So, there is some variability on it, but all in all, we're trying to pay at market for all of our employees, including department heads.
all right, thank you. I think that covers and just in terms of, for general purchase type of things, supplies, our inflation for that is probably somewhat comparable with the 2.5% to 3%, but there's specific things in there like our cost for water purchased from St. Paul, which is I think 8 or 9% per year, or 6% or whatever it is, and then once again the change in the cost with Metropolitan Council for the sewer processing, and then specific things otherwise that might be in there that might be different percentages are just based on the specifics of those marketplaces. Like I know our fuel costs in past years went up quite a bit higher than inflation because fuel costs were going up quite a bit faster. But those are actually, I think, kind of decreasing or increasing less quickly right now as opposed to other things.
Yeah. For St. Paul Water was 9.5% increase. Met Council's over 12% increase. We have various contractual services that increased 5 to 8%. For non-contracted items, we generally use a 3% inflation rate.
And it just so happens that some of those big percent increase items are also some of the biggest chunks of our budget, tens of millions of dollars of impact, right? I mean, not of impact, but the number on which that percentage is applying is a large number. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Anything else from the council at this time? Information we might like to have before next week, or questions we have for the staff? I think one of the requests I heard in the presentation was any guidance from the council as to which approach to use on specifically the sanitary sewer, whether to use the proposed and planned 2% increase or whether to go with the 0 for the sanitary sewer. And that's why that impact was differentiated in the report. Are there thoughts from the council on that particular item? Councilmember Schroeder.
Yes, thank you so much for putting this together and also putting in the alternative for the utility increases. As I said last meeting on this, that I was in favor of trying to keep everything as low as possible in this area, considering the increase in property taxes and everything else. So I would be in support of doing the alternative increase, because anywhere we could save the residents a little money, I think we should.
And just to clarify, the alternative increase is a 0% increase.
Right,
so
right.
no increase.
But the other one, yeah, for those
Right, for
particular
the
ones.
sanitary
Yeah.
sewer, right. Okay. Councilmember Strong.
I would just like to counter with a different question. Then if we do go with the 0 increase for residents at this time, what do you predict might be the impact in 2025?
In 2024,
Yeah, in 2024 as we plan
Okay.
for 2025.
the 0% increase in the base and usage fee is roughly $71,000 less in revenue for 2024 for residential properties.
Right.
So
And
then
so-
we have to make that up. I think the question is, don't we have to make that up at some point
Yeah,
because the rates continue to be.
So rather than a small percentage of increase right now, are we talking a rather large increase next year then to make up.
Or because the utility rate study called for 5 years at 2%, and then going down to 0%, we would just tack on one more year at 2% on the end in 5 years.
I just want to make sure we don't have a balloon payment coming at a later point that is much more jarring and shocking to everyone.
And again, we are going to have an update done to the utility rate study next year. But at this point, I don't see anything jarring in the sanitary sewer system unless Met Council goes crazy with increased costs.
All right. Other thoughts from the council on the sanitary sewer options? And of course, we don't have to make our decision tonight. It's just staff would like, if we can, to provide some direction. But certainly, it wouldn't be ridiculously hard to include both options next week, too. Councilmember Schroeder.
Oh, and I just wanted to, and thank you for, before when you showed us what the fund balances were, I just wanted to point out that that particular fund is very healthy, and we do have some reserves built up in that fund already, and which I agree that I don't think for this coming year that we're going to have an issue with staying at 0.
Councilmember Hatton.
For that reason, I would generally support the 0% in this area because I believe that fund is more than healthy, really. And we probably wouldn't need to do a tag-on increase for the 2025 budget because it is so far in the good right now, so far in the black.
And we
So
can-
that's why I would generally support that 0% at this time.
Councilmember Groff.
I would support the 0% for those reasons, but also because we are going to have another update next year by Ehlers on the study, and that'll give us more information, so I would support that for now.
Right. And I was going to note that one of the things that we do each year is we project out 20 years in the fund and see where the balance is going. And so we'll have a year of 0% to see how that impacts things, plus the study. And so I think that can make some sense. So it sounds like the general direction from the council is to look at the 0%.
Okay?
Great.
And that's an item that we can increase
Yeah,
if we want to. We can't increase the tax levy beyond what we passed in September.
correct.
Anything else from the council for staff to be looking at or questions? Great. Thank you very much. Once again, appreciate the input from the public as well as the work that is done by the staff each year to put together the budget in a $69 million organization. It's not insignificant, certainly. Councilmember Strong.
I'd just like to comment for the public, just so you know, the reason that we have the lack of questions is our budget process starts in March, and we've seen this many, many times. So if it doesn't seem like we have enough questions, it's because we've talked it to death. So just so you know.
Never.
No, we've had length discussions. Thank you.
All right. With that, we're ready for our second public hearing this evening. This is a public hearing to consider a bank of liquor license renewals for 2024. And I would note we did have a bench handout in relation to that. I think there was one additional requested renewal added sort of just under the wire. So we've got that wherever I put my bench handout. There we go. And with that, I think, Mr. Treshner, are you introducing this item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is, as you mentioned, a public hearing to consider liquor license renewals for 2024. We do have this bench handout. There is one addition, Sichuan. We got the paperwork back from the state here literally today, so we want to include them in this cycle of renewals. So we have a variety of liquor licenses that the state allows us to grant out. And for Roseville, we are looking for you to take any comment on the renewal of 7 off-sale intoxicating liquor licenses, 10 off-sale 3.2 non-intoxicating malt liquor licenses, 21 on-sale intoxicating liquor licenses, 20 on-sale 3.2 non-intoxicating malt liquor licenses, 17 on-sale wine licenses, 4 club liquor licenses, 4 brewery licenses, and 1 micro distillery off-sale intoxicating liquor license. So there's a whole slew of them that we're looking for approval here tonight. I would also note that we do compliance checks twice a year, and we do list the establishments that have failed over this past 2-year period. 3-year period that shows that, just for your information, that is something you can consider whether or not to approve it. So as I mentioned, this is a public hearing, so we'd welcome any testimony, and then at the end, we would look for action by the city council, if there's no objections, to approve all these liquor licenses, and we'll let the paperwork down again to the state, and they can move forward at the start of the year to be good from the legal side of it and selling alcohol.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. Are there questions from the city council on the proposed, and these are all renewals, correct? There's no
Correct, all
new
renewals.
licenses in here, okay. So these are all people that have had licenses in the past and are seeking an annual renewal, essentially. Right. Any questions from the council? All right, is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on the proposed renewals of liquor licenses for the various license holders in the city this evening? Anyone from the public? Seeing no one, then we'll close the public hearing on these renewals, and we'll proceed to council consideration. I believe they can be taken up as a single motion.
Correct.
I move approval of all of the licenses.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Etten, seconded by Councilmember Groff to approve the renewals. As outlined, that includes the addition of Cheswan, as was noted by Mr. Trudgeon. Discussion on the motion, as the maker of the motion, Councilmember Etten. As the seconder, Councilmember Groff.
No, we did have the people who have had the compliance checks that failed, and they were here, and we discussed them, so I feel comfortable going ahead with all of them.
All right, any other discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of approving those renewals signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That passes unanimously, and those renewals are approved. That brings us then to our third public hearing this evening. This is a public hearing involving resolutions to vacate various street easements and rights-of-way. And we have our city engineer, Stephanie, oh my gosh, I just lost Smith. And it's such a difficult name to remember. Stephanie Smith with us this evening to present the various vacations that are being proposed and then initiate the hearing. Welcome, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So today we have 5 areas that are proposed for vacation, multiple rights-of-way throughout the city. This map does an overview of the areas. They aren't in alphabetical order because this is phase 2 of a series of vacations that we are doing. We had an initial series of vacations back in June, and those ones were the least controversial. And we're kind of moving through our list of vacations. These ones also are relatively non-controversial. We did send out notices to property owners that were deemed to be affected. So that would be folks that were within the original plat that dedicated the right-of-way or easement, as well as properties that were within 500 feet of the vacation area. Comments received were relatively mild in nature, and generally we're just kind of asking, what is a vacation? A vacation is where the city releases its right over that property, and then the property is generally, it's returned to the underlying property owner to do with as they see fit. So we can go through these individual areas as we take a look at them. So vacation area A is for unimproved portions of the Mount Ridge Road right-of-way. As you can see south of Brenner Avenue, instead of having Mount Ridge Road continuing south, instead there is a public trail. So the area that has the trail on it will be retained as right-of-way, but because it's a trail instead of a road, a 60-foot width right-of-way is not needed, so portions of either side would be vacated with the proposal. Vacation Area E was originally platted as, quote, walk in the plat of Minnesota Realty Company's Owasso, and it connects between Millwood Avenue and West Owasso Boulevard. The area is not intended currently or in the future to have a walkway constructed over it, and so it is proposed for vacation. Vacation Area S is the portion of unimproved Carlise Avenue, and unimproved Kent Street. These were originally dedicated with the plat of the surrounding properties, but there is currently no roadway improved on it, nor is there one proposed for the future. And as a note, there is a private driveway that has been constructed just south of 1960 Dale Street. But that portion of the right-of-way is anticipated to go to that property to the north, so that would be part of their parcel. Vacation area CC is a portion of unimproved Draper Avenue, which was originally dedicated with the surrounding properties, but currently has no roadway constructed on it, nor would we propose to do one in the future. And vacation area FF, it was platted as an alleyway in the plat of C.W. Michael's second edition, and it is not currently improved with a public improvement of a walkway or an alleyway, and so we would propose it for vacation. A public hearing is required by the Minnesota State Statute 412.851. And we can move forward with the public hearing, and council doesn't have any questions to start out with.
All right, thank you. And I should say, I think I promoted you to city engineer, which Ms. Lowry may be concerned about, but the assistant city engineer, hopeful one day to be the city engineer perhaps. But with that being said, do we have any questions from the council on any of these proposed easement vacations or right-of-way vacations? Right.
Just one thing.
Oh, Councilmember Groff.
Just to remind us how that is divided when it's adjoining other properties, how are vacations divided up?
So the city can't say for certain, as it is determined by the county's surveyor's office. They're the ones who make the final determination on where the area is apportioned to for the properties. But in general, it is usually divided amongst the properties that are adjacent to it in the original plat, where it was platted.
Thank you.
All right. And Mr. Trudgeon, I believe you've got some remarks to lead off the public hearing this evening.
Yes, before we jump in, I would note that published and legal mail notices have been provided for this public hearing. Legal notices appeared in the city's legal newspaper, the Pioneer Press, on November 10th and November 17th, 2023, and mail notices were sent on November 14th. Affidavits of publishing and mailing are available in the office of the city engineer, and we did not receive any written objections to these projects.
All right, thank you. And I should note also for the public, two things. One is that generally speaking, the rule of the road, so to speak, is that property is to be privately held unless there is a public purpose to public entities such as the city holding property. Initially, these various easements and rights-of-way were dedicated as part of projects that were built at the time with the expectation that the city would put some sort of public improvement on them. However, it has been determined over time that nothing is going to be built and nothing is required to be built. And so by law, cities and other public entities are not supposed to hang on to property for no public purpose because it is supposed to revert to private property holders. And so that is the reason that we go through these processes every once in a while, is when we've determined that there's property that the city is holding a right over that we should not continue to maintain. Generally speaking, as was just noted, it gets kind of split in various ways based on somebody else's determination as to which of the adjacent property owners will get which portions of those rights-of-way or easements. And certainly that does increase the square footage of individual properties and can affect your tax value for future years. But on the other hand, it also becomes your own property again, and you have the right to do whatever you will on that according to what is allowed. And so that is, of course, once again, one of the philosophies behind reverting these properties back to the private property owners is that is their right ultimately in the end. With that, then, this is a public hearing. It's an opportunity for members of the public to either speak to or ask questions about any of these proposed easement or right-of-way vacations. And then, as we noted earlier, we've got the 3-minute time limit per speaker. We would ask that you state your name and address or street to begin your comments. And then if you have questions, we'll try to get those kind of corralled in the process and then answer those at the end. And so we'll open up the public hearing and seek public input on any of these proposed easement or right-of-way vacations. And then we'll, once the hearing is ended, we'll proceed to council consideration. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak to any of these proposed easement or right-of-way vacations this evening? If there is, feel free to come up to one of the 2 microphones for your comments or questions. All right. Doesn't appear to be anyone here for this evening. One more opportunity. Is there anyone here to speak to these vacations of easements or rights of way? There we go. Hello and welcome.
Hello. Good evening. Thank you, everyone. I'm one of the affected homeowners, and so I have a question.
Once again, can you state your name and...
Sorry, yeah. My name is Stefan Timer. I am affected at CC, which is the 1946 adjacent 1946 Fairview. And so my question is simply about the, will a surveyor be coming out and helping to delineate the new line for me? I purchased the property a couple years ago, and it's always kind of been a, hey, whose is this? I've been taking care of what I believed to be mine based on the location of other things, but I'd be curious if this will be a point where I could count on knowing where a line is for my own information. So that's and thank you for your time and for all you do. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. We'll check if there is anyone else who wishes to speak or ask a question about these proposed easements or right-of-way vacations. All right. Seeing apparently nobody else, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing then. And we'll start with that question, and to the extent staff can answer it. I don't believe that there's an automatic process by which somebody, say, from the county or something comes out to delineate those changed property lines, but I'll defer to staff, just to be sure.
Yes, Mayor, I am not aware of the county having a process where they would automatically do that. And generally, the county does not delineate property lines upon request. It's usually something where you would have to hire a surveyor to do so.
Right, and the process takes a little bit of time, as I understand it, for these to be filed with the county and sort of in the system for a surveyor to know about the change. I don't know if it's a few weeks or a few months or exactly what it is, but I imagine that if one wanted to hire a private surveyor to delineate those property lines for themselves, they would want to give the process some time to complete so that that surveyor is aware of that change.
Yes, Mayor, I'm not aware of what the exact time frame on that is either. It does require a little process on our end where where the city manager registers the vacation, and then it kind of goes through their process where they make the determinations of which properties that those reverts to.
Right. I can imagine with everything else with government, it doesn't happen instantaneously. All right. So that's to the best extent we can answer that this evening, but that's a good question. All right, we've got the request before us. We've got the 5 resolutions, A through E. I'm just trying to track the letters don't match, of course, as was noted, so I had to check with my alphabet again. I believe we're being asked to adopt each resolution individually.
That is correct. And because the proposed vacations are led by the city, it does require a 4/5 majority.
All right, thank you, and thank you for reminding us of that. So we'll need 5 motions. We'll also need at least 4 votes in support, because I think the requirement is a 2/3 majority, which on a 5-member council is
Yes.
4.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Etten.
I would move the vacation for Resolution A for Mount Ridge Road.
I'd second it.
All right, been moved by Councilmember Etten, seconded by Councilmember Schroeder to do A on Mount Ridge Road. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, meeting the 2/3 majority requirement.
I move resolution B.
All right,
Second.
It's moved by Councilmember Strawn, seconded by Councilmember Redden to approve Resolution B, which is Vacation E, as you're keeping track at home. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, meeting the two-thirds majority requirement.
I move approval of Resolution C.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Strawn to approve Resolution C for property S. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, meeting the two-thirds requirement.
I would move to Resolution D be
Second.
adopted.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Strawn to approve Resolution D, which is for property area CC. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, meeting the two-thirds requirement. And then finally, Resolution E.
You should make this.
All right, I'll move Resolution E
Second.
for area FF. It's been moved by Mayor Rowe, seconded by Councilmember Etten. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, also meeting the two-thirds requirement. All right, anything else on these items this evening? Doesn't appear to be the case. Thank you again to staff for going through this process, and I'm sure the next round will be coming before us at some point when it's determined which ones those are going to be. With that, then, we're up to our next item, which is not a public hearing. This is an item to discuss the possibility of changing Roseville Roseville ordinances in relation to lawful gambling in the city, specifically Chapter 304, and the requirements related to charitable gambling establishment numbers and limits. And I'll turn it over, I believe, to Mr. Trudgeon for the presentation on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As mentioned, this is a request by the Roseville Area Youth Hockey Association to consider amending Chapter 304, which is our lawful gambling ordinance, to allow up to 5 separate locations within the city for a nonprofit organization to conduct lawful gambling. Our current code, as you may know, allows up to 3 locations and caps their overall number of gambling permits to 12. Just for your information, lawful gambling includes bingo, pull tabs, raffles, paddle wheels, and tip boards. Currently, as I mentioned, or maybe I didn't mention, we have 8 that are totally issued in the city. The Youth Hockey Association has 3 at Lucky 13, High Pines Brewing, and the Roseville Bingo Hall. I also listed the remaining license holders, just for your information. And just as far as some history, when this was first created in 1992, the city council at the time limited the total amount of lawful gambling licenses to 8 and was only limited to 1 holder for a nonprofit. The feeling at the time was that they wanted to make sure that the impact that the lawful gambling proceeds can make to organizations was felt throughout the community in a variety of different organizations. However, over time, that has changed. Starting in 2011, the City Council did amend the code to allow up to 2 locations for lawful gambling. That was at the request of the Youth Hockey Association. And then a little bit more recently, in 2017, the City Council did amend to have up to 3 locations to conduct for lawful gambling. That was also requested by the Youth Hockey Association. At the time, we actually did a pretty extensive overhaul of Chapter 304, and among the things we changed was increase the lawful gambling premises permits from 8 to 12. And then we also better define the trade area where the charitable gaming proceeds derived in Roseville must be spent by the non-profit organization. So in front of you tonight is a question by the Youth Hockey Association about possibly amending the ordinance. I know there are representatives in the audience that will speak to it, and I did include written information that they did provide me regarding their request.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. And certainly this would be an opportunity for the representatives of the Roseville Youth Hockey Association to come on up and kind of let us know what the thoughts are and what the request is and make their case. And once again, if you could start by introducing yourselves.
Certainly.
And feel free to pull up a couple of extra chairs if you're all going to speak. You can share the microphones.
I will start. My name is Philip Diskard. I live at 3120 Sandy Hook Drive. Do you want everybody to introduce first and then?
That might make sense. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Angela Short, and I work at 2525 North Snelling Avenue, but I live in Ham Lake, Minnesota.
Ashley Horwath, I'm the gambling manager. I work at 2525 Snelling as well. I currently reside in Little Canada, but it's important to say I grew up at 2345 Auerbach.
Got it.
Where my mom
It is
still
important.
Gretchen Holtman, I am the president of Roseville Area Youth Hockey. I bring the area to Roseville, so I live in Little Canada. But I live at 2661 Civic Center. I have 3 boys in hockey, so I'm
Actually,
at the
so you
rink a
do
lot.
have unofficial residence.
Yeah, so I will start. I'm the CEO for Roseville Area Youth Hockey, along with multiple other volunteer positions within the association. We have found that there's significant rising costs within youth hockey, right? And our job as a board is to try to keep costs as low as we can so that we can have more participants, more athletes be able to play hockey. The current locations that we have do provide us nearly $300,000 in helping us be able to reduce costs. However, we've seen that we've had to raise fees year over year for our athletes because costs of ice costs have been increasing, equipment increase, referees, we've seen a 30% increase in the cost for referees this year. And one of the triggers that we have to keep costs low is through charitable gambling. We are very limited on where we can go to increase our locations. Much of the cities around us are, right, we couldn't go to Coon Rapids because Coon Rapids doesn't touch Roseville. So the way we can spread or try to increase our footprint is by cities that touch Roseville. We've learned that Minneapolis, who there's bars that requested us to go into their location, does not allow us to move in there unless you conduct 50% of your business within that city. So we are very limited on where we can go, and the request is then to come to Roseville because we do have one location currently was actively recruiting us to come into their location, has already signed paperwork that they want us there, and this was our next step is to get that increased. So that's really the point I wanted to hit home is we have a large number of athletes. We need to keep the cost low for them and maintain our numbers as a first ring suburb offering hockey, youth hockey. If you look around the youth hockey footprint, there's very few first ring suburbs that still have their own association. The other piece is I do believe over the last several years we've represented Roseville very well within youth hockey. We've been, last year we had 2 teams at Pee Wee go to state. The year prior we had a Pee Wee team go to state. So the product we're putting out is representing Roseville, I would say, well, in comparison to the rest of the state.
And so I just kind of talked to you about statistics, our numbers. As Phil mentioned, we're a small association. The only other first-ring suburb is Bloomington Jefferson. Minneapolis and St. Paul have condensed. That used to be a really flourishing sport in the city, and they only have 1 team each. So we're really trying to make sure that we make hockey accessible to everybody. Our mission and vision is life lessons on and off the ice. We're not just making hockey players, we're making community members, we're making future coaches, future board members, future city council members. We have been a testimony to the sport. We are front and leading in DEI, which is an initiative that matches with the city's mission. So we're one of the first associations in the state to have a DEI board member. And I'm proud to say that he is now working with Minnesota Hockey and USA Hockey to get policies and procedures to make sure that all of our athletes are supported in this sport. We were founded in 1964, so we're going to be 60 next year. Don Black was an inaugural, I see Jason shaking, he was an inaugural component of our history. You know, the JCs were our first fundraiser, and then the VFW sponsored us. We've been really trying to make sure that we can keep this accessible to everybody. And being a 501c3 that has enough expenditures and income makes us kind of like a unicorn in Minnesota charitable gambling. But by giving giving us the opportunity to have more locations, we hope that we could give our funds to other 501c3s. So, football, soccer, really make it so that we can have not just hockey in Roseville, but other accessible sports for all of our kids, because we are a very diverse community. I'd also like to just share that, we do a lot of fundraising for like the kids do. So all of our Bantam teams do community service. Our Bantam B1 level has, for the past 6 years, done Kids for Kids Fighting for Cancer. Last year they raised $10,000 and won a night with the Minnesota Wild. We've continued to put back into the arena. We're one of 5 user groups in the arena. But we do have, our partners, Midway Speed Skating, we put an $18,000 drink rail in. We put the second scoreboard in. We helped with the oval to get the budget over there with the state to make sure that we could have an outdoor rink. We're all very active within the community, and we're really proud of where we're from. And by giving this opportunity, I was president, or just about being president, when we asked in 2017. So I've been here a long time. But I ask that you just do this for the kids, do this for the community to keep growing, and I think it's a really good opportunity for not just our kids, but all of the community.
I think they both hit on a lot of things that are very, very important. One little thing I would add is, to be honest, not all of our locations make a ridiculous amount of money. One specifically, I know for a fact, it's 2 people that said, hey, let's start a business in the city we grew up in, which is Roseville. They don't do really great. So for us, when we're, wow, that's horrible. They're not, they don't make the most money compared to some of the other locations. And, so for us at this point, when another one's come to us, which we do project would make a lot more money for our kids, you kind of have to do the dance when it's the limit of what are you going to do. So far, we've said, we're not walking away from you. Like you're Roseville. So we are mindful of that. Also, there's not any other youth-based Roseville charities right now that are functioning, that are looking for these locations. My kids play multiple sport. I'm a big fan of multiple sport athletes. If that's what you want to do, just they don't need to dive into just one. If that was the case, I don't know that we would actually be here, but we do feel like it's an immediate give back to the kids in our community.
And we do also give back to the high school, too. So we give donations back to both high school teams and really try to honor the kids that went through our program and then go to our high school. And so we're just trying to make it, a legacy in that way. We've had a lot of NHL players. We had a first Miss Hockey, Winnie Brote, who was inaugural in women's hockey and still is, and she's on our board right now. So she's been giving back to the sport her entire life, as is her sister, Marty Serdich, who continues to give back. He lives in Edina. I know, but he comes back and still gives back to our kids as he runs a summer program for them. So all of our alumni comes back and gives to us.
I think I am the assistant gambling manager, and I am out in the bars most of the time. I'm the one that kind of handles everything with the bar owners, and most of the time when we get asked by other people that are in the establishments, like, hey, how do we get this going in our place? We really want to support a Roseville-based team, and we have Roseville Youth Hockey is in our name. Like, we can't go, like he said, to Blaine and be like, yes, Roseville Youth Hockey sponsored it, because they all come looking for places that will give right back to their community. And I would love to help more of those businesses become bigger establishments and things like that, and help them grow as far as having this. They know our teams will come in. They know that we will bring different parents coming in between time, and it's a mutual relationship to keep their business growing also. And every single location we've had is so supportive of us, which is very nice to have. Just want to keep growing that.
All right. Do we have questions from the council? Councilman Bratton?
First, I appreciate all of the things you've highlighted you are doing in the community. I absolutely see that, and we appreciate that. Starting with the students and the kids and moving through other contributions. I have a few questions The first one, you mentioned that Midway Speed Skating is your partner. Is it only at the bingo hall, or are you partnering at the other locations also?
Only the bingo hall.
Only
Okay,
bingo.
that was my understanding, just gray.
Yeah,
so
maybe to,
with-
yeah, to fold off on that, basically, we have a structure, so we have half the days of the month. So this month we have 14, and it just kind of flexes, but legally, when one of us is in session, the other one could have nothing to do with it. So we share the building, and we just have a rotating schedule.
All right, thank you. And then the other thing, Gretchen, you brought up and said, hey, we want to contribute to other sports. Is that something that's formal or something you're saying, hey, this could be something we could do?
I think if we get the 5 locations, if we get up to, and when you're a 501c3 in Minnesota, you have to spend as much as you bring in, right? And if we get to a point that because right now my budget's sitting at about $900,000, and so, we on average guesstimate, it's a guessing, it's a forecasting, okay, we're gonna get $300,000 in charitable gambling. Now, let's say we get 5 locations and they just take off, and we have 1.2 million, we're gonna have to give that money away. And we want to give that back to other organizations that are 501c3s, like baseball, fast pitch, soccer, and that. So informally, yes, but formally, I would like to get it there, and I think we can.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Groff?
Well, thank you for the presentation. It's good to learn a little bit more about your organization. I've heard of it, of course, but wasn't aware of all the things you do for the community. And I guess I'm really impressed with your DEI work. That's great to hear. Wondering if you do anything with scholarships, or how you're working to increase the different skin tones on the teams,
Yeah.
or gender,
Yeah.
those sorts
You want
of
to
things.
speak to that?
Yeah. So
Part of that.
currently we have a budget about $25,000 that we have financial aid, and it's a very, there's only 3 or 4 people in the factors of who makes the decision, and it's accessible to anybody, and no one will be denied for whatever they can pay. So if it's a minimal amount, we do have a lot of other scholarships in the sense of trying to help the kids continue. Hockey is a sport that is all year round now. To Ashley's point, multi-sport athlete, however, you can't put your skates away completely. So we do find other avenues to help our kids to continue to skate in the summer. And then, if you want to.
Yeah, so I'll just highlight that we have about 30 families that participate in that financial aid, so they submit an application. As Gretchen referenced, our 3 people go through those applications and grant what they're requesting. That money comes right from charitable gambling. So there is roughly $25,000 a year goes to just families that are completely in need. We've seen the requests increase year over year. And I do think that's because of the rising costs, but their kids really do love the sport. I would say we are one of the most diverse associations. I don't have any statistics on it, but we're very diverse, and we have transgender athletes that are playing with us. We have
Yeah, we're a melting pot.
Yeah.
It's something that I like to highlight to Minnesota hockey. Not only are our kids diverse, but our board is too. And so we mimic each other. And I think that's really important, that the kids see someone like them sitting on a board, and that they could make systematic change within a sport that is the culture of Minnesota. I was one of the first female, I am the first female president of Roseville Area Youth Hockey. Never played the sport, so there's that caveat too. But also I was one of the first female presidents in the state. And so I always found that important to highlight to the girls, that you could go into a male-dominated sport and be able to do that. Another highlight I would like to talk about too is First Skate. So First Skate is a program that we cultivated years ago. It's about $50. We make it very, very easy. We've partnered with Play It Again Sports in St. Paul. And we used to have all of the equipment like at our disposal, but what I found and what we found is that we didn't want to give any new family ill-fitting gear, because it's very important that they stay protected. So we donated all of our equipment and threw away the stuff that didn't work, and we have a partnership, so they get a coupon, they go down there, they get full outfit of hockey, they come and they have 6 touches with us to see if they like the sport. And then if they do like it, that coupon code goes into their registration for $250. They usually touch the ice on our registration for $250 about 50 times, so it's about $5 a skate. You can't really get anything for $5 anymore. We have professional development that comes out, so through our 4-year-olds up into our 14-year-olds, we're able to provide professional development for skating. Checking is really important, so we're doing a checking clinic to make sure that the boys learn how to not only give a check, but receive a check, because concussion and everything like that. We're really trying to take it to a level of, like I mentioned, life lessons on and off the ice, of like taking these things that they're learning through coming to the rink and coming to learning in the locker room and apply that to their life and disciplines.
Can I do a quick follow-up?
Quick follow-up.
Quick follow-up is, no one's turned away because of lack of funds?
No,
Correct.
never.
Yep, we fund several families with 100%.
100%, yes.
Councilmember Strong.
So how many paid staff do you have?
Right now, we currently have 2, and that is
Okay.
the first time. This is the first time we've had that.
Okay, well, back to the 2019 990 form, it looks like there was 2 at that time, too.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I guess
Well,
Well, we have,
4.
we're
Angie
talking
and
about
I,
the gambling.
Yeah.
for the gambling, Angie and I are the only ones that
Yes.
are salaried employees, assistant gambling manager and gambling manager.
okay.
And
It
then
also lists Gretchen as receiving funding from the
In 2019?
Mm-hmm.
I wish. I know.
You might want to check it.
I
It
might
says-
want to check that.
Well, it's on the public record.
Okay.
$35 an hour for $10,000 in 2019 on the 990 tax form.
From when you were-
So-
Oh, that was when we had the embezzlement and I was running the gambling hall because we didn't want to lose our gambling license, and so I took it.
Yeah.
So that's,
I do note that your official address is actually in Shoreview, at least at that time, at 3570 Lexington Avenue in Shoreview.
That-
So just curious about
that is our account.
Okay.
And
Scheidel and
Scheidel and Mar.
Of those 30 families that are receiving financial aid, how many of those families live in Roseville?
I don't have that information for you. We are a Roseville area, so it is anybody who's within the Roseville area school district.
Or anyone
if-
who chooses to participate in
No,
Roseville?
you-
No, there's waivers, and we're the most over-governed sport in youth sports. So you have to, there's waivers, and we have a district in Minnesota hockey. You have to be able to play where you live.
Or go to school.
Or to go to school.
Or you go to school, yes.
Okay.
I can count off my head of those 30 people right now. I think there's for sure 11 off the top of my head that
Okay.
live in Roseville.
Gotcha. Are any of the students, how is the financing determined? Is that based on what type of, it's like free and reduced lunch, or how is that determined who receives financial aid?
Yep, so there's a list of questions that we ask, and one of the questions is, how much in funds do you need? How much do you need from us? And I believe this year you gave everybody what they asked for.
Yeah, and we don't ask for a free or reduced lunch. We don't ask for any documentation. It's on their merit and honor.
You mentioned that you have some interested party, another organization in Roseville that's seeking, or that is seeking you out. Are you able to share who that is?
Certainly Buffalo Wild Wings,
Okay.
who has started to reach out to all of the youth hockey associations where they're located. Oakdale has,
They opened in St. Cloud, Oakdale's now going, and when they came to us, they just, because this is new, since normally corporate, most chains, that's not really what they want, but they're leaning into that. And yeah, their ask is they're going to the local hockey teams.
Gotcha. And then just the last thing, as far as looking at your 990, it looks like ice rental is one of the biggest.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
you're saying like depreciation, and what items are you owning that you're contributing that
we own the
toward?
bingo hall,
You own
the
bingo
building.
hall? Okay.
The building itself is what we depreciate.
Okay.
And I did in the letter provide our expenses, or what we paid the Roseville Ice Arena, the Oval,
In the county.
the county. So Roseville Arena, our spend last year was $116,000. Our spend at Oval was $41,720. Oscar Johnson Ice Arena, $190,000. We contributed to the 1% tax for Roseville, $14,000. the 10% fund for Roseville tax of $31,000. And in state taxes, we paid $344,000, which is more than our contribution amount to the kids.
And that's all under the state gambling laws.
Correct,
Yeah.
yes, yep, I just wanted to highlight some of our expenses that were, some of our spend in Roseville, and then where some of this money goes.
Okay.
All right. Other questions from the council? None? Okay. So just a couple of things in relation to sort of how this works, under our system right now. So you've said you've got a fourth establishment that is
Seeking.
interested, and you're asking for the potential to have 5 so that you have, I'm assuming, some flexibility and some ability to
I've
do
actually,
additional.
we've already had to decline one other area because we didn't have enough, and they were able to obviously search farther out, so they found a different charity to come in from a different area that falls under the rules, but, not being able to even entertain that idea to help Roseville and our organization was frustrating in that too, so. We do have others that do ask. It's just a matter of, there's also other things coming in that are being built too. Like, I know at some point, maybe Old Chicago will be something else that might be, and that's Roseville. So it's just about maybe being open to having more ways to make more money for the kids.
She's saying that the Old Chicago might be a different business
Might be
in the
something at
future
some
that
point
may
in
be
the
interested
future.
in doing.
Just saying there's
If they
Right,
come
yeah,
back,
yeah.
but they're closed. So
Well,
No,
they're
I'm
gone.
saying
If it's something else, right,
or,
yeah.
yeah, just saying that there are other avenues that come in at some point possibly.
So, and my follow-up question too is do you look to the potential to do any charitable gambling opportunities within St. Paul, or is that just a marketplace where you can't, as an outside entity, get into?
St. Paul has some interesting rules associated with charitable gambling.
Okay, Ms. Tierney may know a little bit about that.
So what we've been able to, if a location tells a charitable or a nonprofit that they don't want them in there any longer, it's a 1-year wait period until they can get a new.
Anywhere.
A new, yeah, and the locations make money, right? So they get a portion of the proceeds or the sales, the net gaming revenue. So for them to lose a location or a 501c3 for a year is very difficult. We are always looking, though. The nice thing is that Buffalo Wild Wings waited for us to be able to get to this point. If we're able to get the approval, move in there, I will be having the conversations with them about their Maplewood location, because there's no one in that location currently. But this is the one location that he really came to us for to start with. I will then seek their other location.
All right. Any other questions? Well, we appreciate you being here this evening and making your case to us and all the work that you do in the community with our young people. Really appreciate your highlighting that as well. So I think the council will do some discussion here and perhaps provide some guidance to staff as to whether we'll bring something forward and what it might look like, and stay tuned in that regard. We'll go then to the council discussion, so feel free to relax in the comfortable seats that aren't right in front of us.
Thank you for everything you do.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just to kind of check in with the council, does the council wish to look to have staff bring forward some potential changes to the ordinance? Councilmember Bratton?
Mayor, I would be interested in changes, but I'm wondering about the thoughts. One of the reasons we had a rule many years ago was making sure no one completely dominated the situation, right? They are doing good things, and they're the only groups other than the primary owners of some establishments that are not doing this. So I think it makes sense to open some doors. My question is whether there should be trigger for reducing that if other organizations do come in and we've hit our max. So we got a max of 12. Let's say they have 5, no one else has more than 1. Do we cause that to knock back down to 4 or 3 with a 3 guaranteed if we have other organizations? Does that make sense?
I think I get the sense of what you're trying to do there, and
It may be more complicated legally than it's worth.
well, that's what we pay Ms. Tierney the big dollars for, right? I think that sort of gets to what I was wondering about. I was kind of looking at it in the sense of one of the objectives is to make sure that we're sort of supporting diverse needs within the community. And I was just doing, of course, being an engineer, I did the math, and So 5 of 12 is about 42% of the overall sites. And of course, right now, there's only 8 premises, so theoretically, 5 is actually, over half. And that could get concerning, potentially, if the objective is not to be, as was said, dominant. And how do we address that? Do we try to assign it as no single charity can have more than half of the current licenses? And that if the number of premises increases, then potentially they could have another one or something. I don't know how you put that into a code necessarily, but that might be a way to try to get at it. My concern is I don't think we would want to necessarily take something away from somebody once they're using that and dependent on the revenue. So I wouldn't want it necessarily to be something that triggers a takeaway where maybe over time an establishment may decide not to have that charity or have any charities at that establishment just through natural attrition. Maybe something could be dealt with in terms of how we get back to more parity in the system. That may be something we want maybe staff and our legal folks to take a look at, thinking philosophically how to address that. Because I definitely want to be respectful of the original notion of not having one entity so dominant, but I don't want to have a system that is just like yanking things away from people all the time too. So those are some thoughts, Councilmember Strong.
And I agree, and I worked in nonprofit administration, so that's why the question's centered around the 990, because it really does kind of tell who an organization is. I appreciate all the work you do, and I'm sure the Oval has great appreciation for your input and all that you add to it. I just want to make sure that if we are talking 11 families, that it's really hard that live in Roseville, that we're saying, okay, and you can have over 50% of our establishments. I just did a quick search, and we often hear about Roseville area fast pitch feeling like they're not getting enough attention in the parks and other things. Do these other organizations know that they would have the opportunity to do this? I mean, is this a publicly known entity? Do they have to have someone who's partly paid on staff to even know that, baseball, football, NSSA, fast pitch, all these organizations could have something? And I would be somewhat in agreement with Councilmember Etten and saying, well, you can have it for now, but I even more so agree with Mayor Rowe in that once someone has that, it's really hard to say, nope, take it back, and now you've relied upon that income. It's really hard to balance that, but I feel like it's best to make sure that we have an opportunity for it's almost an opportunity for reach out to other organizations and say, hey, do you know you can do this?
Councilmember Schroeder.
Well, I want to make sure that we don't just concentrate on these numbers, because I would hate to limit this, because I do think this organization is doing some really good things for the community and the kids and all the work they're doing. I mean, their EDI stuff, and that they're really spending, money on financial aid. And so to say, well, we really don't want you to have too many of these, and now additional families and kids. And there's a lot of kids that go to Roseville High School that don't live in Roseville. So, I mean, they're still in the community. So I guess I want to make sure that, my view, the more we can help out the community, and it sounds like this is, the businesses would like to do it. And I think, you open it up and let these, because if you look at this list, there are other people or other organizations working on this, and let them know we're looking at this. But I'd hate to not let them expand just because we want in the future possibility, that kind of a thing. So I guess if they can do some good for the community in the near future, how can we do that how can we balance the two, I guess is what I'm saying on that side, so.
And, sorry, you've had your chance at the table, but if we may want to ask questions to clarify things, but I did want to note a couple of things on the scholarships. It's just a part of what this funding goes towards in terms of your operations. And so, looking at just the number of scholarship recipients that may be Roseville residents and it's a number off the top of the head too, is not the whole picture. And certainly, I think, basically, as was noted, everything that this organization does has to be for hockey players in the Roseville Area School District, essentially, so that are not otherwise in other programs. And so that's sort of the community impact. And I do appreciate the notion of wanting to make sure we are supporting the organizations. And I think the reality probably is that there is a threshold for any organization, charitable organization, to get involved in the support through charitable gambling that not every organization can do. And then certainly it's got to be having a willing participant on the premises side as well. And that's probably a part of why we only have currently 8 of our 12 premises even being used, of which at least half are the organization itself. So that's I think that the marketplace sort of is telling us what's out there right now, and certainly if other organizations want to do the charitable gambling, they've got to sort of invest in that infrastructure within their organization, and not everybody's capable of doing that. Not to say that you couldn't band together or whatever, but obviously there's paperwork involved in all of that, to put it mildly. So it seems like, and I'll certainly recognize other councilors, it seems like generally speaking, we're looking to try to do something, and I think it's going to require it may not happen instantaneously. One of the things we could do is we could look at a short-term increase from 3 to 4 to deal with the sort of the pending transaction, if we're comfortable with that, and then bring back more sophisticated language, because this is not something that's changing every day. Certainly we don't see the numbers fluctuating all over the place all the time. So we've got some time if we want to be more thoughtful. But Councilmember Groff, thoughts from you?
Well, I'd be supportive of them. I think for me, they're doing a lot of good work in the community. They seem to be reflecting a lot of the values that I would like to see with our youth. And what the final document looks like is, that can be worked out. I wouldn't want over half going to one group either. I think that's kind of a number that we should be careful about. But I think we should proceed and get some information from staff on how it could be written up with those caveats.
Does staff have any questions about sort of what the council is kind of looking at, or any, is this something that perhaps either already has been as part of the previous process, or could again be looked at in terms of what other communities are doing, if they're doing anything in this type of language area?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I'm not sure what other cities are doing. I know we spent extensive amount of time in 2017 really looking at the trade area to really make sure that it did benefit. So we have these built-in standards that it's designed to benefit. The fact that we increased it to 12, and I'm just trying to recall when we changed it from 8 to 12, I think maybe we're at 8 and thought maybe we get some more. The fact that we don't have additional licenses out seems to me there's some capacity, and for those that would want to be able to do it, they choose not to for whatever reason, as you mentioned, maybe capacity or lack of interest on that. I'd be a little leery, to be honest, until I hear more about how we would either pull something back or have some automatic triggers in there. I think probably the direct route's the best way to do it, change the number if that's what you want to do. If it becomes a problem at some point, whether the total number of licenses or there is additional requests, you can deal with that more directly with the facts at hand at that time. Perhaps the solution, the short-term solution, is to increase it to 4. That would be a simple fix in the ordinance, it's just changing number 3 to 4 in 30402A. We would need to actually publish that for 10 days, so we couldn't take that up until the January council meeting. But and then in the meantime, I suppose we could look at what other cities are doing and how they've dealt with this number. You kind of are building in this no more than half already, just with up to 5 if we have 12, for instance. So I think perhaps the direct route's the best way. If you want to fix something now, fix it, change that, and we can continue to have conversations moving forward. But I don't know, in my mind at least, how it would work with triggers. If something happens, then you can write something in the code that automatically reverts beyond taking business away. I'm not sure what those triggers would look like, so I think it's best to probably just deal with it as it comes up with a question.
Right, and I personally, I'm not sure that I'm ready to go to 5 yet, but 4, seems something we could do And that would be, as you said, a relatively easy change. So that might be the first step, and then we can noodle on it some more and think about, because I've got thoughts in my mind as to how maybe that could be approached in terms of how to do it without taking things away from people, but I'm not there yet in terms of what that might look like. And as I noted, Ms. Tierney may have some thoughts there too, or may want to defer to us. But either way, I think that the short-term answer seems to be that the council is okay with going to the 4.
Yes.
And then we'll figure out if there's a way to try to make sure that one entity isn't dominating all of the premises permits.
Okay.
Councilmember Strawn.
I'm not really comfortable moving even to 4 at this point. I just feel like hockey, I realize it's why it's here. It's not the most accessible sport for the masses. Most kids aren't gonna, there's just a lot of other, baseball, basketball, there's other things within the city, and you do need to have a gambling manager in order to have, so you do need to have some kind of paid staff. They have to be trained and all that stuff. But I think, if there's so few entities in the city who are interested, when you have someone who's trained and they're out there kind of, I'm sure people aren't just coming, you're like having to seek things out. And so I'm kind of a little concerned that the few entities that might exist have the tenacity of the hockey people to get them first. And so by adding, I don't know, I just feel like it's always gonna come out that they're gonna keep seeking more. They're the ones been driving this far, and I don't know. So they're just concerned that's, not to undermine what they've done well, but just that there are a lot of other kids besides hockey players in this world, and maybe other people need some opportunities. So, and it's not known to be the most diverse sport, and I realize that helps to have the DEI and all that, but I just concerned. And I realize, the people in the city, but it's not our job as the city council of Roseville to provide entertainment to all of the Roseville area schools. So.
It sounds like, once again, I think we've got the plan to bring back the language with the 4, and then we can have the council debate at that time.
Yep.
I don't know if Councilmember Schroeder, did you have any other
Yeah,
thoughts?
no, I was going to say I support going to 4. I think that's a good short-term fix on this. And again, other sports have had the opportunity. We've had enough permits it's not like we're putting a new one in, so they've had the opportunity. And just that they don't come forward and don't want to get into it shouldn't mean that we should penalize somebody who's willing to do some charitable work. So that's how I looked at that.
Great. We have our direction to staff there?
I do.
All right. Thank you again, and we'll look forward to bringing this back probably at one of our January meetings.
Yep,
Keep
January,
folks
first one,
informed.
January 9th. Yeah, I'll be in touch with you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, that then brings us to item 7E, which is to receive our final Envision Roseville report. And we have our Assistant City Manager, Rebecca Olson, with us this evening, as well as a cast of thousands. Oh, wait, there's one other person. To bring this final report to us. So we'll welcome you here and maybe reintroduce yourselves for benefit of the public, and look forward to the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I'm just going to take a second and figure out where I put the.
I'll go analog if I need to.
I'll
You look like you're ready, because we can take like a 5-minute break if you
That
want
would
to,
be
because we're close to our 8 o'clock break time. So we'll take a 5-minute break.
I'm gonna take this down so that no
Yep.
hold their intention.
Yep. They have a different rating now.
Your secret stash?
I'm a chain gum chewer.
He's always out of
She doesn't want to bring it in. She
We're back up. We're back from our break. And hopefully, we're all set on our technical side. I'll turn it back over to Ms. Olson, our Assistant City Manager, to introduce this final report on our Envision Roseville process.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Tonight is the culmination of nearly 24 months of work on this community visioning process. Back in March of 2021, you began discussing the concept of community visioning and beginning to plan for it. Ultimately, you decided to choose Dan Associates to help guide this work, and Dan Edgerton is here tonight to present their final report on this process. Little bit of background. This intensive community-driven process was intended to review and update the city's aspirations, and also to develop outcomes to help us understand how to achieve those aspirations. What you will hear tonight comes directly from the community. This is the result of intentional and targeted engagement. It was time and resource intensive, but this visioning process isn't the only method that the city uses to receive input. There's multitude of engagement channels that we have. We've got city surveys, we've got program participation, public comment, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. However, this process was intentional about targeting those people that aren't traditionally involved in civic processes. The beauty of this approach is that although it targeted those who may be historically underrepresented, it also captured other voices as well. And this is one of the reasons we approached it in this manner, because if we don't intentionally set out to reach those who are underengaged, we might miss them. But when we do set our intentions correctly, we capture not only those voices, but we cast that wide net and get other voices as well. So throughout this process, staff and the consultants team were very cognizant of the relationships that were being built with people who participated. If there were promises made, such as the number of meetings to attend, or if there was follow-up that was said to be done, we made sure that those promises were kept. We realize that there's a level of trust that is being built throughout this process, and relationships have to be established before people feel comfortable and confident enough to share their opinions with us. And so our staff and the rest of us here at the city see this visioning process as not just one project, but a foundation upon which we can build further relationships with our community. So tonight, you are going to receive this report. You're being asked to just receive it this evening. There is a lot of information in your packet, but Dan is here to kind of help you digest some of that. And you'll have an opportunity to hear from him, review the findings, ask any questions. And we can come back at a later point to discuss next steps, whether it's adopting aspirations, developing strategic planning, or et cetera, et cetera. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Rebecca. Mr. Mayor, council members, thanks again for having me back. I'm Dan Edgerton. I'm with Zan Associates. We are the consultant team that you selected to work on this, and I was our project manager. I also want to acknowledge, also in the room is Jana King, who was part of our team and did a lot of really great work on this project. So what we're going to do tonight is we've prepared a final document. It's the final deliverable. It's not the end of the process, but it's meant to be the document that can capture the deliverable. You know, it's the work that we did. It's that documentation that you have, and hopefully the foundation or the jump-off point for, you know, now and into the future when it comes to visioning. So I've got a slideshow I'm going to go through. It's kind of long, but I'll fly through some of the slides and I'll slow down on the ones that are a little bit more important, and of course yell or you know, afterwards we can jump back as needed. So that's the intention for tonight. Here's our agenda. Here's what we're going to cover. I just said all of this, but we'll touch on all of the elements kind of in the work plan, and finally land at, you know, what those community aspirations and outcomes look like. So before we get into the nuts and bolts, just a little bit of reflecting back on what we were trying to do. This is what we set out to do at the beginning. This was sort of our charge, and I think Rebecca captured it really well, so I'm not going to dwell a heck of a lot on this one, but one thing that I do want to say is that, you know, flipping to the definition of what a community aspiration is not my intention to read this to you, but just to give you the cliff notes here, a community aspiration is intended to be that North Star, that guiding principle. I say community aspirations because that's what we use. As a side note, I use that as a synonym with vision, with guiding principles, you know, different vernacular, but it kind of means the same thing. It's meant to be that foundation or that compass arrow to point the city now and into the future. It should be aspirational, but also attainable. Like, it's not meant to be super pie in the sky, spaceships and flying cars and all of that, but it should be something that we strive to, right? What is it not? It's not specific strategies. It's not your strategic plan, you know, into the future. It's meant to provide the framework for that and have some criteria maybe that you can measure against as you get into that kind of stuff. So that's what we're talking about. This is reflecting back. This is a timeline that I prepared in June of 2021 for our original proposal. So this is part of the journey we've been on. And we were going to end in summer, and we're like 6 months past that. And that's not unexpected. There were reasons. In phase one, we extended a couple of extra months. I came and talked to you, I don't know, last winter, and we decided to extend to try to get more responses under the first survey, and we did that. And we did something similar in phase two. So the schedule slipped and kind of extended a little bit, but it wasn't unexpected. And tonight we're at the end of this timeline and time to think about what comes next. So the project itself, as was mentioned, was intended to be community-led, and to do that, we did a lot of intentional community engagement. It was structured in 2 phases, and what I'm going to do in my presentation is walk you through what was done in each of those phases. Some of this will be kind of repeat from what we talked about before, but I've added to it and fleshed it out a little bit. So there were 2 phases. Phase 1 was the fun part. It was the visioning. It was getting out there and talking with people, making all of those initial contacts and relationships. Phase 2, we said, here's what we heard. Here's some draft community aspirations, and what do you think? Did we get it right? Do we need to add? What does that look like to you? It was that kind of a discussion. So without further ado, 3,500 plus community interactions. This is hard to quantify. Did somebody attended a meeting, and did they also leave a comment? So don't lean too heavily on the numbers themselves. But I did want to give you a sense of kind of the scale. What we tried to do was be intentional about who we talked to, but at the same time cast that wide net to try to really get a sampling of what's out there. So a lot of live engagement activities. Many of you were there, and thank you for that, out in the community. We had a robust online program with surveys, with interactive maps, with a cool Hello Lamppost tool, with some direct business engagement, workshops and interviews, all of that kind of stuff went into this. I want to specifically acknowledge and credit the community advisory group. It was months ago, but you may remember this. The council helped to form the group, as did staff. They represented various backgrounds. They were members of your commissions. They were property owners. They were business representatives. And while they met just twice, they came at really pivotal times and helped us to form what we were going to do to guide the approach. So we met the first time right before we launched phase 1, and the second time right before we launched phase 2. So they were really that sounding board that helped us to shape and vet and make sure we're asking the right questions, that sort of thing. They were great. We focused on community organizations and building partnerships as a way to reach some of those target populations, traditionally untapped populations. Our focus was on BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. It was on lower income. It was on those groups that are those groups plus those that are listed on the slide: students and families, faith-based communities, those types of things. And so we reached out to all of them, like all of the community organizations in Roseville, and had some level of interaction with many more than were on this slide. These are the ones that we sat down and really engaged with. So it's a much smaller subset of the bigger program. Those are there. These are the community events. I'm not going to dwell on this. We had some really cool, there's some cool eye candy in this presentation, but virtual engagement, I know many of you are well aware of what we did here, but we had a virtual engagement platform that had lots of hits. We did Hello Lamppost signs in the community, which were super fun. And then we used the city's existing social media communication channels, including social media, including the email blast system, things that you already do. And then in addition to that, we had a specific campaign that was focused on business engagement that was led by Janet King, who's here. My slide is incorrect, and I'm not sure why there's wonky formatting, but there were 42 responses and not 40, and there were 15 targeted interviews and not 14. And so, this wasn't meant to be huge numbers, but instead it was meant to be a very specific targeting to get some interaction with the business community, and we can talk more about the findings from that in a little bit here. Just some eye candy type of stuff that I've got for you now. Just photos of what these activities look like, and I'm happy to go into the details of any of them, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of flip through some of these and get caught up on my notes. So I don't miss stuff, because I always do that. So that was phase 1. We went out and we asked folks, what's your vision for the future? What's your vision now and into the future? How are things looking? What's important to you? We took that information and we tabulated it. And so this is the really hard part. You'll notice in the information that you received, we gave you the raw data from the surveys, which is really fun to look at. A lot of very specific comments. Fix the pothole here, add that program there. That's all really great stuff, but we needed to find a way to wrangle that and to get it into something that we can use for this community aspirations. So it wasn't easy. We do have some data analysts on staff that helped sort of structure our framework for that. Essentially, we read them all and we assigned codes. We did a coding thing. So if anybody's done anything like that, survey review type of stuff, that's what we did. And that helped us to organize into the key themes. We took all of that and we started to develop the draft community aspiration statements and kind of the outcomes. What does it look like? And started to bring that out. We went to the community advisory group, and in phase 2 asked the question, did we get this right? What did we miss? That kind of thing. So that's what phase 2 was. You can see kind of the things that we did there. So that's a quick summary. There's a whole lot of more detail to be told, but of what we did for community engagement. Where I'm going to go next is to really dig into the community aspirations. Just to sort of not bury the lead, one of the key findings that popped out pretty early actually is that we were intentional not to start with the old community aspirations because we didn't want to bias the results. But what we found is that they sort of lined up anyway. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but it was definitely an interesting finding. They weren't exact. I think maybe magnitude or importance might have shifted a little bit here or there, but generally the categories that we started with are the categories or themes that we ended with, which I thought was interesting. So with that, I'll kind of jump into them. There's a lot of detail here, and while I'm going to be tempted to read everything to you, I'm going to read some of it to you, and I'm going to let you read some of it on your own. So you've got some information in the report. This is a summary. This is like the Cliff Notes. Here are the themes and the community aspirations. So when I talk about themes, it's like the 3-word version of what the aspiration is talking about. So that's, what does theme mean? That's what I'm talking about. So you can see that the key themes were transportation and infrastructure, green space and environmental conservation. That's the one that crept up, or if it was newer in this go around, that stuck out to me. City parks, facilities, and programming, city services and civic engagement, welcoming and inclusive, safety and security, housing and development, and business and economy. So what you have in your report, and this is where I'm not going to read everything to you, but I'm going to kind of show you what's there so you can navigate it on your own, right? But for each of those categories, those themes, there's like a section in the report. There's a section of slides in my presentation. They're color-coded in the report as well. So you've got, in this one, for example, transportation and infrastructure, the first thing you see is just this is a roll-up of the types of comments. It's not perfect. If you start to dig into those comments, you'll see they get really specific, and that coding did kind of intentionally wash it down to a common denominator, for better or worse. So I think that city and staff should look at those specific comments and take them to heart, but that wasn't the intention of this. So I say all that because I don't want to minimize that person who wrote me a long message about how important the on-ramp to Highway 36 is. We agree, and MnDOT's working on it, but I want to make sure that, people know that their input that they provided wasn't for naught. It wasn't wasted. So anyway, when you get into this, you've got a section for summary of the comments, just to give you a feel of sort of what led to the aspirations. And then you've got the kind of the big shebang, if you will, the aspiration statement, and then the outcomes. So the aspiration statement is meant to be the bigger umbrella, that sort of organizes us, and the outcomes are meant to be the teeth, if you will, the thing that the city might be able to influence or act on. So I'm at a loss. My original intent was to, like I said, read this all to you. I don't think I'm gonna, but I'll maybe start with the aspirations. Transportation and infrastructure. The words were well-crafted or intentionally crafted based on that coding process I described, and then based on reviews with the community advisor group and with staff. But I would encourage you not to, you can wordsmith these all you want after I'm gone, but the intention is hopefully there. So for transportation, we aspire to be a place with safe, inclusive, and well-connected transportation systems that support health and well-being of residents, visitors, commuters, customers, business, this is why I didn't want to read it to you, and employees, regardless of ability to access cultural background or socioeconomic standing. So it's a mouthful. But then you get into the outcome statements. That's the aspiration, and it's where it's multimodal and well-connected. It's safe for people to walk. There are policies that are supportive of transit. So that's the flavor, right, of what we're trying to go through. So I'll kind of flip through these a little bit faster now and maybe hit some highlights. Green space and environmental conservation was a big one, but it was kind of universal. The theme was, well, we should have that, and we should protect it, and we should value it, right? There wasn't a whole lot of nuance to it. There was some that I'll get to around when we talk about development, about, I'm for or against multifamily housing, we should keep green space, but we tried to parse those out where we could. So there's a green space aspiration. We want to treasure our open space, our green space, preserve it. We want to be proactive about pursuing sustainability, those types of things. So that's that one. Parks and recreation came up quite a bit. I want to acknowledge that's probably the nature of where we went and talked to people, right? We were out in the community. We were out at the parks. I didn't say this before. These themes or aspirations are in order of frequency, right? It's about relatively, squinty eye. This one had the most comments, this one. But what they are not is they are not intended to be rank order. We did not present them that way. We did not ask the community to vet them in that way. And so if there is a hierarchy applied to them, I'll leave that up to you and staff later. But as presented here, Parks and Recreation is not meant to have more bearing or less bearing than the one before it or the one after it. So I say all of that because Parks and Recreation had a lot. We had a lot of comments about the different parks, the different programs, and that kind of thing. Those types of things. So there it is. There's the community aspiration for Parks and Recreation. Maybe a new nuance that I would highlight for this go around is that it was the age appropriate and culturally relevant was kind of the theme. And those are sort of jargony words or maybe loaded words, but the sentiment that underlies that in my mind is acknowledging that there are now a growing group of diverse communities within the city, and they recreate in maybe different ways than the communities were doing in the 80s or whatever when we built the park buildings. And so that the facilities and programming that we offer should start to reflect that and should do it in a proactive way is sort of the sentiment that we got. And then there were a whole ton of, as you can imagine, very specific comments on change this building, redo that building, use the buildings, don't use the buildings. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. So
Splash pad.
Splash pad and community center were the #1 comments across the board. We want a Shoreview style community center and we want a splash pad. So you can take that for what it is.
maintenance building.
Yep. City services and engagement. This one, the nuance, the difference between this one and the last one is this one were comments that tended to be more broad. It was more about health and human services. It was more about city services and access to services. And it was about doing promotion of city services in a way that's inclusive. So that's the summary of the input, and you can again see the aspiration statement, and that theme of being inclusive and available to all people carries through in this one. There were, I encourage you to, I'm not going to read them all to you, but there were some nuances that stuck out in this one, in my mind at least, when it comes to the work that Jana did with the businesses, and that's why you'll see a little bit stronger language in this one about rules and regulation and guidance. And in my mind, and Jana would give a much better explanation, but this was about level playing field and being inclusive and enforcing our rules in a way that's fair and equitable for everybody. So that did sneak into this one. Welcoming and inclusive, this one is a direct reflection of the fact that we've got more diversity in the city, which is one of the driving factors behind why this effort was being undertaken. One of some of the most important voices behind this theme that we connected with were the cultural liaisons at the school, and in particular, I didn't know this when we started, but they have specific family nights for different cultures. So for example, this is a picture of African American family night, which was like the best event of all of them that we did, and just so many insightful, thoughtful conversations. This was at high school, so there were older students and parents. So really appreciated that, and also just one-on-one interviews with the cultural liaisons. They were able to say things like, well, that's important, or no, they're not going to come to that because they're not going to drive in the winter, so you should, it was that kind of thing, which really helped us. So that's who we heard from on that one. And again, here's the aspiration about equity, about, again, proactively facilitating opportunities for different cultures. So that's what this one's about. Safety and security. This one was how do I want to say it? It was, on my first read, I didn't see it. I was like, well, weird, that one dropped off. But then when we dug into some of the nuance, it was there, but it was maybe embedded in the park comment, where it was like, I want safer park facility, or I want better access to park facilities, and I want them to be safe and secure. Another place that this came out, again, was in the dialogues with businesses and I guess the direct appreciation for things like emergency response times that are fast and effective, and responsiveness of police and fire, and all of that sort of being important. I think we talked about this last year. Another kind of nuance around this one is when I'm out talking to somebody at a park, they're not going to think about safety and security, because that's maybe something that, well, they already have. Like, but if you ask them, is it important to have fast response times for an ambulance? They're like, of course, yeah. So anyway, that's this one and the nature of some of the comments. You can read, but there's an aspiration about it. Police and fire, and maintaining response times and support for police and fire, working on neighborhood issues. There were some comments about crime and houselessness and things of that nature that did kind of become recurring. So that's some of the nature of those comments. And I think there's two more. So housing and development. This one is similar to the green space one. It was like there wasn't a lot to say about it, but there were a lot of comments. And I'll just be really frank with you. They were on, we want more development and density, or we don't. And it wasn't possible to say, this is the value that we go with. That this one clearly won, and that's probably not a surprise. But what I took from that, particularly in phase 2, as we went and started to ask some questions, well, what does that look like? Why is it? What does it mean to you? Is that it's really about balance, and people value the existing neighborhood structure that is here. They value those single family, they like it that they know their neighborhoods and the kids could grow up together. And they don't want to lose that in favor of, development that isn't done in an appropriate way to respect that neighborhood character. At the same time, other people maybe recognize that there is a need for additional housing. There is a need for more diverse opportunities for businesses, within the city, and a desire to encourage that. So it's this balance, and it's about doing things intentionally is kind of what we took from that one, and that's what we tried to say in the aspirations. So we aspire to do that, to value our diverse neighborhoods, but also to support the changing demographics of the community. So that's what this one is about in my mind. Okay, and then the last one is business and economy. This was, again, a specific focus that we wanted to reach out and talk with some of the businesses. And just to backtrack a little bit, the business work that Jana did tracked with the phase 1 and phase 2 that the broader engagement followed, such that we started out with a survey that was similar to the community engagement survey, but specifically targeted towards businesses. So changing the language, changing the audience a little bit, but generally asking the same types of things. And then we came back to them, and Jana did the one-on-one interviews, talking with folks with those draft sort of themes and aspiration statements to try to understand where there's alignment, or maybe where there's, divergence between, the broader body of input that we were getting and what was happening with business and economy. And my read on it was there wasn't divergence, there was alignment, but there's more nuance when it comes to business, and there are more specific desires and needs, predictably, right? You're very focused on your own parking lot and that repaving or whatever the case may be. So those were some of the comments that we got, wanting to support small businesses, wanting the city to explore avenues to help to incentivize things like revitalization. And there were a lot of specific ideas within the comments, but we intentionally didn't go there. Supporting employment opportunities, all of those sorts of things. The Roseville and Harmar comments also ended up in this category. Rosedale, rather, sorry, and Harmar comments. People value those, and that's hopefully not a surprise to you, but Rosedale came up a lot, and people have a personal connection to Harmar. I don't know. I thought it was weird, because I walked in there, and I remember Harmar growing up. I went to the movie theater, whatever, it's fine. But so here are the business aspirations. These ones are largely based on the work that Jana did, but infused with what we heard from the community as well. So supporting that diversity, supporting options across sectors, those sorts of things, with a definite focus on small business, locally owned, no more big box, those types of things. So that's a lot, and I resisted the urge to read all of that to you intentionally, but I do want you to read it and go back to it. just, I didn't want to leave you on a cliffhanger, so findings, but the findings were really the aspirations, but here they are. General alignment with what we heard or what you had in the 2006 community aspirations with some updates. And I think that's a positive outcome. I think it helps to validate what we did, and so I think that's good. It's intended to guide decision-making, but it's not a strategic plan, and in fact, it's future conversations with staff on exactly how that looks, but you'll need to think about what to do with that next. I think it's important to continue to leverage the relationships with those partner agencies. The consultant team was there, but Corey and Rebecca were at just about everything, and they're going to own those relationships moving forward, and that's huge. So I mentioned in the raw data, there are a lot of specific issues, property-specific things, and it would be really painful to read the many, many thousands of comments, but there are some key themes around things like Highway 36, around schools, around some things that are specific that we might want to look at and either share with our partners or think about addressing. So that's what that is. And then close the feedback loop or continue the feedback loop with the CAG, with your commissions, with the community partnerships that we started to build, to let them know that this wasn't a one and done thing, and that the city cares and values that input. So that's what I have. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor, and happy to have any further discussion, answer any questions, and we can call on Jana as needed. So,
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to the staff as well as everybody with Zan and your partners for the work on this, and appreciate the presentation this evening, and certainly appreciate the final report here. I will open it up to council members for any feedback, questions, comments. Councilmember Bratton?
I would like to tell you that I appreciate some of the intentional outreach you did. I know that we talked early on about that a few times, and for you to have found the liaisons in the schools and specific nights to connect with people, going to some of these events and in our community and using those as an opportunity to connect with people, saying, hey, all these people are stuck in line for the face painting. Let's just start talking to them, and using those times when people are out to make sure we are talking to a lot of people. So thank you for that.
All right. Other questions, comments, feedback? Councilmember Brown?
So I did read most of the comments that people made. Some of them weren't all included.
Yeah.
They didn't.
In the summary, yeah, that's great.
But I thought that was revealing for me. It was sort of like door knocking when you're running for re-election, and you hear this wide variety of things. One neighbor here will say one thing, and 2 doors down it'll be something totally different. So that was helpful for me just to think about those things, and appreciate the work, the reports. Very involved, and the outreach you did was impressive. I especially liked the efforts you made to the BIPOC community and got more information for us there. I wasn't terribly surprised that the aspirations weren't very different from before, because one thing you find when you are door knocking in Roseville, that most of the people do like living in Roseville and they don't want huge changes in Roseville. So, and the same with the development. You get that little bit of tension going on where, yes, we want housing for people, but we don't want to change our little block or our neighborhood. So we're very familiar with that.
Other questions, thoughts, feedback? Councilmember Schroeder?
I agree with Councilor Groff on, I'm not surprised, because I too, the door knocking, you say, well, what would you like to change? So many people did not have any suggestions for change. I mean, they do have an idea what they'd like, and so on that piece of it. And one question. You said you had 3,500 participants in this whole thing, give or take. Just for the guesstimate, what percentage of those do you think are actually from Roseville? Because I know some of them were, some students aren't from Roseville, and some of the lampposts might not be from Roseville. So I'm just curious, what percentage is from Roseville?
Yeah, The answer is most. I would say upwards of 90%. I don't have a solid way of tabulating. For instance, if somebody was at Roseville Mall, they could have been from anywhere. But what we did ask in our both our online survey, the in-person version of the questionnaire had a way to suss this out, and with our Hello Lamppost is, are you a resident? And so if I take the results of those exercises and sort of apply that sample to the wider body, I can say that, based on that, most 90%. I think there were like 2 Hello Lamppost responses that weren't. One of them was, where's Bloomingdale's or something like that. Like it was like, because they thought it was the directory, I don't know. So, yeah.
I know, because I read a lot of the comments too, and some of them, they talk about like downtown and stuff.
Yeah.
We have a downtown? That was the one,
Yeah.
I go, where's downtown? But on that, and actually, it's not a bad feedback to hear what other people think of Roseville if you're coming in as a visitor or a, coming through. So I was just curious, so thank you. And thank you for the work.
Other questions, thoughts, comments? Councilmember Strawn.
I just wanted to say that really, I heard the same thing and continue to hear the same thing. Community center, splash pad, those seem to be the 2 things. And I know we've talked recently about the potential for a splash pad. When I moved here 20 years ago, I was told that community center was just around the corner, and I don't see it anywhere in the distance.
Who told you that?
A neighbor, it wasn't a reliable source.
Don't name names.
I don't think they live there anymore.
Didn't get a community center.
Yeah, they moved. But I do appreciate the time and effort, and I do appreciate that kind of the aha moment of going to that African American family night. And I've long had relationships with the liaisons, having been a teacher, and so I know that they can be kind of a kind of this panacea, like all of these things right in one place that you were seeking, all these places, and there it is. So I appreciate that you located that. But I did.
And we paid them, by the way. Sorry to interrupt. We did.
Oh, that's good. I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear that. I know that I was at the Nature Center when you did one of your early events, and there was a lot of interest from kids and being involved, and there was just, it was a well-populated table, and I appreciated that. There was a lot of interest in people wanting to be part of it and continuing to see that for a long period of time. So thank you.
And I'll just add, when I first was approaching the final report, and I was wondering, well, what are we going to get in terms of the outcomes part of it? Because that's always kind of the challenging piece. And I actually felt, good about it, because I thought, for the most part, you can take those and you can start to maybe develop some measurable things that you can apply towards what we're doing. And so and that's exactly when we went into this, what I was hoping we would have is at least the framework or the point in the direction of putting together some things that we can use to measure our progress towards these aspirations. Because that's always the biggest challenge when you do visioning, is that it's easy to sort of say, here's what we want to be. The harder part is to say, well, what does it mean? How do we know we're there? And so that piece of it really came out well, and I wanted to say that I appreciated that was the case. I know a lot of work on the part of the consultant as staff, and everybody was involved in getting to that point. So I did want to emphasize and point that out. The other thing, I totally agree with the notion of continuing to maintain the relationships that have been developed. I can see us doing a flashy budget presentation at the next African American night at the schools, or I don't know. But that's not a good idea, probably. But there can be ways to help people connect that don't normally connect to some of these processes. I mean, that's the whole point of this, is to develop those connections and find ways that they can work to help us do a better job of the job we do. So I wanted to also acknowledge that was good to see, and can be something that we can build on. So I appreciate that as well, and I look forward to hours of reading all the comments, and my eyes will be bloodshot at the end of it. But I believe that's going to also kind of coincide with a lot of what we as the elected leaders here, either in getting to these seats or in our day-to-day lives here. So once again, thank you to everyone. Thank you to everybody in the public that did it. And the only thing I wanted to note is I also agree with the community advisory group continuing to be perhaps a sounding board through the rest of the stages of the process. I also thought that to the extent, I mean, they're kind of the easiest targets is not the right word, the easiest people to connect with that were involved in the process, but sort of, for lack of a better word, an exit interview with those folks to say, hey, what did you think of the process? What do you think worked? What do you think didn't work? What should we have done differently? Those kinds of things. I think it would be good to at least check in with those folks. And if there happened to be a way to ping people that participated in the process, that we know who they are and we know how to contact them, and just say, hey, what's your general feedback? It always helps us to know how people feel about, how it went, and once again, the outcomes are going to be what they're looking for. But even just to kind of rate the process, because we want to understand, probably for our benefit, but even for your own benefit, there may be something that, you can take away as a consultant in this area from that kind of feedback as well. Other thoughts or questions from the council? I do want to provide an opportunity for public comment. We don't have a lot of members of the public remaining here this evening, but if there is anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this evening, this would be an opportunity to do so, and certainly not the last. All right. Very good. Well, thank you again. Appreciate it very much, and I know it was a lot of work, and now you can all go back to your regular lives, right? or the work you're doing for other cities in the same area.
The next one.
More immediately onto the Vikings game.
There you go. There you go. No spoilers.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, that brings us then to consideration of, so we go from the lofty back to the sort of the nitty-gritty of our jobs here, the consideration of some amendments to various portions of Title VIII of our city code as it relates to the water and sewer rates and collection of charges. And I'm not sure if it's going to be Mr. Trudgeon or Ms. Petrick. It looks like Finance Director Michelle Petrick is going to introduce this item for us and start the conversation. Ms. Petrick, welcome back.
Thank you. We are proposing a couple of amendments to the ordinance, Title VIII, Water and Sewer Rates and Collection of Charges, specifically Section 801.11, which relates to the water rates and collection of water charges, and Section 802.12, which relates to the sewer rates and collection of sewer charges. Currently, the city adds a 10% late payment penalty only on the most recent delinquent bill. And we do not currently compound that late payment penalty. In talking to some other cities, they do compound their late payments, so we are proposing to make an amendment to allow for compounding of the late payment penalty of 10%. In addition, the city certifies unpaid accounts to the county for collection with property taxes. The current practice with regard to delinquent utilities is that any account in excess of 90 days past due is brought to the council after we notify all the accounts that they're 90 days past due and they have a certain date by which they have to pay, or we bring it to the council. About 54% of the delinquent accounts show up on the list that we provide to the council for certification. We have had a $25 administrative fee, which the city attorney said should be noted in the ordinance, so we're adding that language to the ordinance. It's not a new fee. It's been in existence. That covers all the administrative charges, staff time, postage, printing, and then certifying it to the county. In addition, Roseville has merely certified the delinquent account with the late penalty fee, and then this administrative fee. Other cities certify with an interest rate. And so we are proposing to add the ability to certify with an interest rate that the county would collect and then remit to us. The reason we're recommending this is between our certification process, where a bill is 90 days past due, by the time we get through the process, submit it to the county throughout the year, and then it goes on the taxes in the next year, it can be up to 2 years before we collect a delinquent utility account. Under the current system, the financing of a delinquent account is really not that detrimental. And I use that lightly in the sense that 10% is a somewhat hefty late payment fee, but we have people who habitually allow their utility accounts to be delinquent to get certified to their taxes because there's a nominal additional cost. For the city, we have incurred the costs, we've paid St. Paul Regional Water, we've paid our staff, we've paid Met Council, and our cash flow is impacted by delinquencies. We could have factored that in to our utility rates, but that's not fair to utility customers who pay in a timely fashion. So keeping it really short and sweet, that's what we are recommending, amending the ordinance to include the compounding of the late payment, putting in the fact that we do have an administrative charge, and then putting in an interest rate for the county to charge. Questions?
All right. Just one kind of technical question, just to understand how the interest rate portion works in terms of the county collection. So do we certify it, say we certify something, I know we've got some on our consent agenda tonight, that goes to the county sometime after this approval tonight. Does the interest start sort of counting until the point when the county collects, and they collect the amount plus whatever interest has accrued at that rate over the entire time? Or how, because it would be such a variable number for the county to keep track of. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, the county has the systems set up because just about every city does have an interest rate that they certify.
Okay.
We would not be putting this into place with tonight's delinquency.
Right.
We would put it in with the 24 delinquencies. And generally speaking, while we certify 4 times a year, the county actually does not put it on the taxes till the end of the year. So they would put it on as of January 1 with 8% until it's paid, whether that's first half or second half.
Or if it's not paid in the first or second half, it would continue until it's paid.
It would not continue because these are one-year assessments.
Gotcha, okay.
So they would stay on the tax roll, but interest wouldn't continue to accrue because it's a one-year assessment only.
I see, okay. So the interest rate just applies to the 1 year for collection purposes?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Other questions from the council? Councilmember Strawn.
So how often are the accounts paid within that year? Are people generally paying up, are they catching up within that year? Or is there a reason to continue that assessment beyond a year, or is that possible?
Generally speaking, most cities only do it as a one-year assessment. The only assessments that I'm aware of that go beyond 1 year are street-related.
Okay, thank you.
So, and just to clarify that, so does that mean that after the end of the year, it doesn't mean they don't have to pay it anymore?
No.
It just no longer is charged interest?
Correct.
I see. But it's accumulated the interest over the course of that year? Okay.
Correct.
Councilmember.
So following on that, what if they don't pay their taxes at all?
After 6 years, the property becomes tax delinquent and goes through the forfeiture process. And ultimately is sold, and at some point in the future, we would get hopefully some of the delinquent.
But we wouldn't get it for the years after the 1 year?
No.
That would, oh, that's interesting.
Unless obviously they have subsequent delinquencies
Yeah.
that would be added in. Yeah.
Yes.
So, just trying to clarify this too. So, and of course, the state has a whole mechanism, or the county has a whole mechanism to collect property taxes, and it's largely by state law. But I forgot my train of thought, so I'm going to defer to Councilmember Schroeder, and then I'll circle back to it maybe.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, those exact questions I had asked earlier, and so I probably should have shared that with the council, my answers that I got, because that's exactly what I asked, is this interest gonna go on forever? And then if they didn't pay their property taxes, how would that look? But I do like your point about people can say, well, I had my 10%, and my $25, and I don't, so now I can take a whole nother year to pay it off and not have any more penalty or fee on it, so that, in a way, if you already accumulated that, why not try to put it off even longer? Because you're right, it's the cost of money just got really small. So, yeah, so that was a very good point, so thank you for clarifying that.
All right. If there aren't other questions from the council, I believe we are being asked to adopt these changes this evening. I do want to provide an opportunity for members of the public to speak to this. If there are any questions or comments on this proposed ordinance change that anyone, members of the public may have, this would be an opportunity to do so. All right, seeing no one come forward, we have the proposed requested changes, and I believe both, in this case, in each case, there would be an ordinance adoption as well as approval of a publication of an ordinance summary because of the complexity of the language. Thoughts from the council and/or motion?
I would move that the council recommend adopting by separate action, it says, the ordinance amending Title 8, Section 801.
I'd second it.
And just to clarify, is there any reason we can't adopt two ordinances with one motion?
I don't think so, no.
And then two resolutions?
Yep.
All right, so if that's the desire of the maker of the motion.
Well, I would do that. I would add the second on there.
Okay, so it was moved by Councilmember Groff, and I forgot who seconded it.
I seconded it, yeah.
Councilmember Schroeder, and I was so interested in asking my clarifying question. I forgot. So this is to adopt both ordinance changes, the change to section related to the water as well as the change related to the sewer. Discussion on the motion as the maker of the motion, Councilmember Groff.
Well, the thing that I've noticed, believe it or not, I do read those delinquencies when they come through. And not that I know everyone by it.
Checking to see if you're on it.
Yeah, it's kind of that too, but also that there is repetition in there, and so I think we have to find some way to, I mean, this is a small thing, but maybe this will get people's attention to we just want them to pay on time. We don't want to do these penalties. We don't want to do compounded interest. Just pay the bill on time, and we don't have to do it. But maybe this will be an incentive to catch their attention. That's why I'm supporting it.
Right, and as the seconder of the motion, Councilmember Schroeder, anything?
No, well said, and that's enough.
Right, any other discussion? I think the only thing I will add is certainly people who are in difficult financial straits deserve respect and sympathy.
Yes.
And certainly that's exactly, I think, the intention. However, as with any debt that is incurred, whether it's with the city of Roseville for utility fees or the county for property taxes or your credit card company or whatever it is, it is an obligation that one has to make. And certainly, there are ways that one can work with their finances to provide an ability to pay and pay penalties. And I know we've had cases where we've been working with people for quite some time to try to work through their difficulties before it even gets to a point of being certified on the taxes. I think that's sort of our last resort in our process anyway. So, we want to be sympathetic, we want to be helpful, we want to work with people, but we also do want people to, take their obligations seriously and ultimately pay those. And so I'm supportive of these changes. There's no other comments on the motion. We've got the motion to adopt both ordinance changes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Is there a motion on the authorization to publish the summaries?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, seconded by Councilmember Etten to authorize publication of ordinance summaries by the resolutions in the packet. Is there any further discussion on that motion? All right, hearing none. Once again, this requires a 2/3 majority. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, meeting that 2/3 requirement. All right, thank you again to staff for working on this. And then finally, under business items, we have a discussion related to our task we assigned to our commissions earlier to talk about their scope, duties, and functions. And so I'm not sure who's going to lead off the conversation on this. Is that going to be Mr. Trudgeon?
I didn't really have anything.
Or is he going to defer
Although
to Councilmember
I
Etten?
would mention there is a bench handout here today that if you looked in your packet, there's some, the bottom of the comments for the Finance Commission, there was some actual letters missing, so somehow when we converted it to the digital packet, it lost it. So this is here just with a complete comments from the Finance Commission chair regarding their work on there. So just wanted to point that out in case you looked at your packet and it didn't make any sense.
Thank you. And I know this is an item that was sort of spearheaded by Councilmember Etten. I don't know if Councilmember Etten, you wanted to sort of kick off the
Yeah,
conversation.
I think it'll take a couple hours. That's right.
Sure, that's why we took our break an hour ago.
I can't, no, it won't.
chance
But
to shine.
hopefully you found kind of in the middle of the attachments, this summary that Mr. Trudgeon put together. I think it does a pretty good job of saying, hey, what did people look at? But you really have to look at each commission's work. Here we had the original city code, and then at the beginning of each different section of each commission, there's here sections that they are looking at changing. Different commissions handle this really differently. Some did not consider some of the questions like number of members or frequency of meetings. I don't know if that was just they were also overwhelmed, or they were super comfortable with it, or sometimes people like what they're doing even if they don't like what they're doing, right? So anyway, so that's there. I think the next thing we would look at, the first thing is, do we want to go forward with the updates in it bringing back kind of a draft thing with cross-outs and underlines and things like that as the commissions have brought forward? We can just try to do that. Do we want to consider blending and sort of amending some of those things? There were two that made fairly large changes. The largest of those, HRIC, completely rewrote their code. And Park and Rec added a lot of items to their code. So do we want to filter some of that either with members of those commissions or with a subset of our council, or both? The next thing I think we should think about is considering adjusting some of the number of meetings for some of these. Many, again, did not consider it, but are there different formats? We've talked about this off and on for several years. There are some commissions that I was surprised at how little we got back from them, considering their frustrations that they have come to the council with over the last few years. And that's fine. That's, you know, like, that's what they brought back. But are there times to format things differently, cut back on some of the things? For example, despite a former chair being down the dais from me, does the Finance Commission need to meet 11, 12 months a year? Or could it follow more of the budget cycle and have the ability to meet for special meetings as they are needed to follow projects for finance, bigger finance things? The HRIC, one of the things that we hear is concern about the amount of time it takes, as they've done a fantastic job in the last year or two getting members out and being at events and running tables and things like that. Do we change the number of regular meetings to reflect that additional work in the community, which is work we've asked them to do? But there's a total amount of time people can commit to a city before they become overwhelmed and say, well, that's more than I can do. So is there an adjustment that we think about there for whether it's those commissions or others? The final one that I feel like is sitting out there, I don't know if we want to discuss it, but is around that several commissions have their fingers and want some thoughts on the environment. and it's interesting that it came out in our aspirations as moving up. But we've got PWET, Public Works, Environment, and Transportation. And we have Park and Rec that is doing a lot of environmental work as our tree board and other things within the parks. And then the Planning Commission said, hey, how about us? So I even thought similarly to how we do the, what's the?
Ethics.
Ethics Committee, thank you. Do we have at the PWET Environmental Super Meeting, do we have 2 members from Parks and 2 from Planning to be there and, or look for ways to kind of have a few meetings a year where those commissions come together and talk subsets about the environment and how they can work cohesively around that or not. So those are the different framings I have, and I open the floor to anyone to shoot those ideas down or come up with new ones or whatever.
All right. Who's ready to shoot some ideas down? No, Councilmember Strahan.
No, I appreciated what you, first of all, I appreciate that you took this on because I think it's super important. It was so inconsistent. And I wonder too, when we've tasked some groups with a lot of things and they've come through, we do note that we often don't see people on the HRIC make it a full term. You know, so maybe looking at what other options might exist. Do we add a couple commissioners? Do we have subcommission? Does that change in some way? I don't know what that looks like. I appreciate the kind of being, but what came to me was wondering if we take advantage of the skills of Shannon Prather, who's, you know, fabulous wordsmithing skills. If there could be some consistency across these so they're written similarly, and that would make it easier for us to be able to look at them side by side, because right now they're very different from one another. It's like comparing an apple to a hippopotamus. They're just very different. And so if we had similar, then I think it'd be easier for us to like, yeah, maybe this is what we want to do. But I appreciate that this conversation was started, more than started, advanced. And I appreciate, you know, that I think this is good for everyone involved, because knowing what is expected of you is back to those conversations even at the, you know, at the interview, when we ask people what they want to do and they really don't know, because it's hard enough for the people on the commission to know. So I think it's a fabulous start, and I thank you for opening the conversation.
Councilmember Schroeder.
Yes, I agree. I think the formats really need to be the same because they were all really different. You would not know that they were from the same organization. So that I think that would be very important. Getting to some of the comments that Mr. Etten down there talked about was actually on the Finance Commission. I actually think they could be more involved with the other commissions on helping them figure out like how they're working on things and how could that financially affect the city and other things too. So when you talk about getting people together from different commissions to discuss like sustainability, I actually think the idea of possibly even having that, maybe all the chairs or subgroups can get together and talk about different things they can work together with the commissions. And I think I've had a couple people ask me on some of the commissions, well, how does this affect things financially? And that's where I think the Finance Commission could work with some of these other ones to help them look at their funds. You know, they got these big funds and their 20-year plan and some of these other things. And so I do think there's some back and forth on there. And I have to say I was a bit disappointed that some of them, like the Finance Commission, did very little, except for the one little email on the purpose statement. I really thought that there could have been a better expansion on that, but that's just my view. And I do think that there could be some that one I think is really important, and that would be new for us to do. So how does that look? And of course, then, you know, if you become chair, do you want to have an additional meeting? You know, I don't know, we talk about people spending too much time on all this different stuff, but I do think that there is some cross-pollination that could really be useful. So I do agree with that side of it. So as in how do we go forward with this? I do think there needs to be some conversations about, and maybe we need to look at, I can't imagine we can come to a conclusion tonight on
No,
this.
no, this is not meant to be
So-
decided tonight. no.
I would say we probably, I like the idea of going through and, let's have the red line version, because some of them did that, but some of them didn't. This is fine, this little chart, but I'd like to see it in the actual,
Ordinance format.
charter that we have for each of those. And I think that would be a starting point. And then also, I think there might be some more thoughts the commission, or the council can do is, what is it that we want these groups to do, our commissions to do? And maybe we've gotten some feedback from what their thoughts are they can do, and now maybe we can take that and add in some more and say, well, yeah, that's great. As a council, maybe there's these other aspirations that you need to work on, especially if we're trying to keep the city moving forward. So anyways, that's just some of my thoughts.
I just say in response to that, I totally agree. I know that we can't be experts on everything, so it's really nice if the PWET decided to, approve something, and this is why, that's really important for them to understand. It's really important for, we appreciate and we value what they say. But I think just kind of making that give and take a little bit more clear, of here's why we want you here, here's the purpose that we see, here's what you see, and then finding that kind of that intersection, because I don't know if they always, the Venn diagram might be kind of wide, but finding it be more inclusive and expectations clear.
Councilor McGrath, thoughts?
Well, I think I'm very impressed that this got going, because this has kind of been hanging around for how many years?
Several.
And Councilmember Atten finally took the bull by the horns and kind of went out there, actually met with the different commissions, and I think that was really an important piece that was different than what we've done in the past, as far as I can recall. I liked what I've heard. All of you are right. I agree with all the statements that have been made tonight. I just think I need to add to those things. The number of meetings, we always struggle with that. I would want more input on that, especially if we're going to change the scope. And that would be the last piece to probably address, and the number of members too. So continue on is what I would say.
I'm sorry I did not acknowledge you also as a former chair. There are a lot of former chairs sitting in different.
I'm sure there are.
Former Parks and Rec chair.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
But anyway, I went after finance and
Well,
I saw
no,
that chair. And
I won't hold it against
okay,
you.
I'm sorry.
I do want to kind of circle back on a couple of things. So specific to you mentioned that HRIC probably made the most substantive changes to their code. I think it might make
Yes.
sense to have a joint discussion between the council and the members. Anyone who wants to participate doesn't have to be the whole commission unless they want it to be. At a work session maybe to talk through some of that.
Good.
Because we want to understand it better, and they may have more clarification they can provide about why they did what they did, and I think that's important. I think also in that same conversation, it would make sense for any commission that we're talking about changing membership numbers or numbers of meetings where they didn't weigh in on that at all. I would definitely want to make sure we have the ability to have that conversation. Because I think specific to the HRIC, I'm very worried that for any commission, the meetings are the only place they can really do their business. Just like our council meetings, the only place we can do our business. If we limit that opportunity, then they may not be able to do as much business. And so we just need to understand that. And I think they have to be able to weigh in on that. And so I would suggest that as part of it as well. I'm kind of formulating the notion of an idea of sort of a working group that periodically meets that's more informal among the chairs and vice chairs of each commission. And they can set their own agenda. It can be pretty informal. It's not an official city commission meeting. So hopefully we don't have a lot of open meeting issues. Certainly that's not a majority of any one commission. So that, and they could talk about how they could work together on environmental issues or how they could work on financial matters and give us some insight on it. I think that might make some sense to maybe, if we want to establish a group like that, those could be maybe the first couple of sort of assignments for them to look at and provide some feedback to us.
Such consternation from the attorney.
It's past my bedtime.
Oh,
No consternation.
I hate you to have consternation.
Usually, if I am getting in trouble with our city attorney, they're leaping across the dais to cut me off. But no, I think that might make some sense. to talk about that. And I understand we may not want, to ask people to do more things, but on the other hand, if we want people to make better connections, and I know we've heard from commission members that they can't sort of have informal gatherings because of open meeting law issues, and they've been scared to death by our attorney about that. So if we can have a group that isn't subject to that, where there could be some of that inter-commission interaction on an informal basis and an ability to talk through some things and maybe jointly recommend things, and they can then maybe go back to commissions for weighing in an input and official commission recommendations to the council, or however it may be kind of sort of ad hoc as individual situations or issues arise. Maybe we experiment with that a little bit in the coming months, and that might be a way to figure out how to deal with a couple of those issues, financial and environmental issues, and how we deal with more than one commission being interested in them.
I do feel
so
that
those are my
rewriting is very close to the top of things that need to happen first.
Well, I think yeah, there's definitely like that technical rewriting where I think every commission needs to have that purpose statement, and we need to make sure that's all refined and good, and then the formatting and consistency issues are dealt with across all the commissions. I think that process should be sort of on a parallel track to a lot of this. I agree. Thanks for reminding us of that. Does that help kind of guide the next steps of the process and what Councilmember Atten's going to do?
Quit his day job and work on this full time.
I did, Jane. Oh, boy.
That's
You
what-
gonna do this
I wanted to make sure
tomorrow?
you were.
Yes, tomorrow, okay. Rachel's got it.
You're off for holiday break coming up. Come on.
So, and that's a good point, is, what's our time frame and expectations for some of this stuff, too, is probably a good thing to talk a little bit about, because we certainly don't want to make it difficult for anybody to get through any of these next steps.
If I could, I just may had a thought, is who's going to own moving this going ahead? Certainly staff can help, but I think it's important council is helping drive some of this, as far as whether it's consistency and informal review before we bring something forward, liaison with the commissions at the appropriate times whenever that may need to happen. I think it's totally doable, for instance, the HRC to bring them back at a work session and have some clarification sooner than later. But what about the other commissions? And, if I'm going to be the main point person on the staff side for this, is there a subcommittee of council members working on it, or one or two of you, or who should I interact with?
I think it couldn't be any more than two of us.
True.
Unless we want to have more council meetings. But first of all, Councilmember Atten, would you like to continue to work on this?
I cannot wait.
Okay. And is there
Yeah.
somebody who would like to join Councilmember Atten as a member of this informal ad hoc subcommittee
Sure,
on commissions?
I would be happy
Councilmember
to.
Schumer? All right.
We have two volunteers.
There we go.
All right.
I think that's an idea I was going to suggest also. I think that makes some sense. And,
And then we'll review Pat at the same time.
Dual purpose.
because it's the same group, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, well, I appreciate all the work that our commissions did, and certainly the work that
Yeah.
Councilmember Atten did to get, and to prod us to get us to this point. So I think it's a good start, and I think we've got some things we can be doing to continue to improve this. All right, that wasn't 2 hours. Next,
Yeah.
we have consideration of city council and EDA minutes. We've got the council minutes from October 23rd. We've got our EDA and council minutes from November 6th. Those have been circulated to council members. Changes and corrections have been made as a result of that process. And we've got those before us for consideration this evening. I'll check, are there any changes or corrections that council members would like to make to any of those minutes as they're presented to us this evening? Otherwise, a motion to approve one or two or all of them would be in order.
I would move to approve all of them.
Second.
All right. That was an eager second. Councilmember Shorter moves, Councilmember Groff seconds approval of all those 3 minutes as presented. Any discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Those minutes are approved. That brings us to the aforementioned consent agenda. I mentioned it in the first 2 minutes of the meeting. Mr. Trudgeon, would you give us a brief summary of the consent items this evening?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 10A approves payments in the amount of $2,216,291.24. Item 10B approves 2024 business licenses for 10 recycling haulers, 13 solid waste haulers, 1 pawn shop and precious metal dealer, and 10 THC retail licenses. Item 10C certifies unpaid utility and other charges to the 2024 property tax rolls. I would note one exception, and it was brought up earlier in the meeting, the 2719 Lexington Avenue is the strip mall that we actually own across the street. That is in the top of page 3, I think, if you look at the attachments. That was inadvertently added to it since we own it. What happens is that the management company collects as part of the rent and the CAM fees, and it's paid through the management company, not the individual tenants. We had a transition from Gone companies to McGough companies, and somehow that got dropped, and it got inadvertently added to this list, so we do not want to certify that because we're certifying to ourselves. We are making, they're working on it today to get that payment full today, because the money's on hand. It's just, it was confusion on who was responsible for that. So as part of this approval for the certification, would be the list contained in Schedule A, except for those two accounts, one's in irrigation, other one's for the water service at 2719 Lexington Avenue. As a clarification. Moving on, item 10D approves an extension of the contract with Time Saver Offsite Secretarial Services for recording City Council and City Commission meeting minutes. Item 10E approves entering into a labor agreement with International Association of Local Firefighters Local 5051. The contract will run for 2 years from January 1st, 2024 to December 31st, 2025. As part of the agreement, the firefighters will receive a 4% market adjustment and 3% cost of living adjustments to their wages in 24 and in 25. This agreement has been ratified by union members. Item 10F approves entering into a professional services agreement with Bolton and Mink to provide engineering services for the Dale Owasso Sanitary Lift Station project. Item 10G authorizes the extension of the addendum to the Minnesota Wildlife Rehabilitation Center ground lease in Roseville Central Park. This lease addendum requires the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center to construct a parking lot and driveway improvements should they be necessary in the future. This lease addendum has been extended several times previously, and this action will extend the arrangement until the end of 2028. Then finally, item 10H approves a 3.2% benefit increase for the members of the Roseville Fire Relief Association in accordance with City Resolution 10442 that ties the annual increase to the Social Security Cost of Living Allowance, and that is the consent agenda.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. Is there a motion on the consent agenda items?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, second by Councilmember Etten to approve the consent agenda items as outlined, with the note of the change to exclude the property at 2719 Lexington from the certification rolls on that item, which is 10C. With that, we've got the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Those items are approved. And that brings us then to our future agenda review. Mr. Trudgeon, once again.
Well, I know you're aware of it, and nobody's counting, but we have one more council meeting left this year, and that is next Monday. That is the big one for the budget, as we alluded to earlier. So we'll be looking to adopt the final budget and levy, adopt the fee schedule, and adopt the 2024 utility rates. We also want to have a couple other discussion items, one regarding short-term regulations discussion. This has been something we talked about earlier in the year, and finally getting it back in front of you just to continue talking about potential changes. We're not looking for any specific approvals that night, more of a discussion and guidance. We also will have some HRIC members, speaking of them here, talking about their plans for highlighting city proclamations next year as more of an informational share. We also want to discuss 2024 legislative priorities. The session starts, I think, early February, so we do want to get this done. But as I was looking through the list and preparing the case already, quite a lot of our existing priorities have been adopted this last session. So it might be a smaller list unless we want to add more to it. So we'll go through that. I do expect that'll be the initial touches. You can see in January, we'll probably come back and just try to ratify that up. And then also Parks and Rec have a natural resources contract. They're as ready for approval, so we'll look to approve that. Our next meeting after that won't be until January 8th, and we'll do some of our normal business items with the acting mayor, city council liaisons, city council advisory commission rules of procedure. And then I'll discuss or declare any commission vacancies as we've been reaching out to people as they're up for renewal, and also receive the public work plan for 2024 and I said, continue our work on legislative priorities. And there'll be probably a few other items added, given that gap of time that we may throw up on the council agenda. I would note, beyond that, we have 3 meetings in January, so one of them can kind of serve as a work session, so I'd probably target that for bringing the HRC back, if they can make it for that, to continue the discussion about the commission's scope and duties.
Right. And certainly in one of those meetings, we'll probably have our ordinance update on the going to 4.
Yes, yeah, I can,
Or 4
do that
premises.
January 8th, I think that
Yep.
should be that.
Okay. Any questions on the upcoming agenda or councilmember requested agenda items or liaison reports, announcements? All right. Hearing none, then the only item left on our agenda is adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, seconded by Councilmember Groff. To adjourn, no discussion on a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and we are adjourned at 9:17. Thank you, everyone.